Thanks for tuning in to the DemiTastes Whiskey Podcast. DemiTaste Podcast. All right, yeah, canned intros. Uh, yeah, thanks for tuning in to the DemiTaste Podcast. Today, I'm your host, DemiTastes, and today we are going to have Caitlin Bartlemay from Clear Creek Distillery talk to us about the unaged spirits part of the Clear Creek portfolio, which includes a tasting of vodkas that she has prepared for us. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Bear with us if you're usually watching for the whiskey content. I think that the general spirits content should also be interesting. I'm also joined today by my co-host Spooky Chicken, and if we're lucky, Phill will drop in later. And without further ado, let's bring Caitlin on.
Ta-da!
So I love that you're sitting in the distillery today. I think that that's just the perfect background.
Yeah, of course I am. Should I move around so I can prove that it's not a fake one? It's actually a real live distillery that I'm in.
With the door behind you and do NPC kind of stuff. Okay, Caitlin, last time I had someone from Clear Creek on, I made the mistake of thinking that my audience knows everything about you. So I'm going to right off the bat say, Caitlin, please tell us about yourself and your history with Clear Creek and whatever it is that you'd like us to know about Clear Creek's portfolio.
Well, a brief introduction for me. My name is Caitlin Bartlemay. I have been with the brand for 13 years. I was very fortunate in that I was hired right out of college to work at Clear Creek Distillery. I have a degree in food science from Oregon State University, and I grew up a wheat farmer on a 120 some odd year old wheat farm in Eastern Oregon, and my dad started a winery when I was in middle school. So I caught the fermentation bug early. I like to tell people that because maybe Food Network will reach out to me, but I was probably their first ever #1 fan when they first released the network. My parents were always a little bit confused why their daughter that grew up in the middle of nowhere in wheat country is absolutely obsessed with a Japanese cooking show, but Iron Chef is the best show that's ever been invented since ever. And I couldn't get enough of it. And bless them, they tolerated an amount of it being on TV during times when the whole family would be in the living room watching TV. Anyway, so that's kind of how I got interested in food and flavor and science. Between Iron Chef and Good Eats, I think I was kind of predestined to be at a craft distillery, making all kinds of esoteric brandies and trying to explain to the world why they're special and why they're important and why they've been here the whole time and why specifically brandy isn't a 4-letter word. And then when it comes to the history of Clear Creek Distillery was founded in 1985 by a man named Steve McCarthy. He originally was doing just the clear spirits and a couple different ages of apple brandy. The whole idea behind Clear Creek, the reason we exist at all, he had been traveling around the world with another company that he owned called Michaels of Oregon, which was an outdoors sports outfitting company. And he had, through all of his travels through Europe, fallen in love with brandy, specifically pear brandy. And over in Europe, it's called predominantly it's called Poire Williams. It's made from the Williams pear. Turns out the Williams pear and the Bartlett pear are the same pear, which is a fun story for another time since you're holding a vodka podcast over my head for the eventual brandy podcast that we get to have. I'll talk about the wild ride of the history of the Bartlett pear on that episode. A little teaser. And he eventually sold that company for what he would say is a sack of cash. And he was in his early 40s and wasn't really sure what he was going to do with himself. Another branch of his family still lives here in the Hood River Valley and have been this whole time growing Bartlett pears. And they were having a hard time getting a good price for their Bartlett pears with the decline of the fruit cocktail. And Steve was like, I really love this Williams pear brandy, this Bartlett pear brandy. It's really, there's nobody that really makes it here in the US. It's hard to come by. Why don't I just start a distillery? That can't be that hard. I'll start a distillery. Cool. At the time in 1985, Clear Creek Distillery was the third ever craft distillery in the United States, followed behind Germain Raban and St. George. And he actually called up St. George, Jörg Rupf, the owner and founder of St. George, and was like, hey, so you grew up making this brandy stuff in Austria, and you make some really good stuff down there in California. I just bought these 2 stills, and I know what I'd like to make, but I'm not really sure how to make it. If I paid you a bunch of money. Would you come up here and teach me how to use my stills? And as the story goes, Jorg was not necessarily sure that it was the best idea to, within 2 years of starting his distillery, train his immediate and direct competitor. But, small businesses need cash flow, and cash is cash. So he came up to Portland for 2 weeks and trained Steve how to use that still, which is right behind me, still in use today. And the rest is really history. By 2013, Steve was in his 70s. He had since spun out McCarthy's American Single Malt, unbeknownst to him, igniting a fire under, hopefully soon, a new standard of identity, a new spirits category in the United States, with McCarthy's being the first American Single Malt. And we've done a bunch of fun projects, some that are still on the shelf, some that we still make today, some that are just kind of jotted down in the annals of history of Clear Creek Distillery. But he was getting ready to retire. He'd made it to his 70s, and he was like, this distillery thing has been great, but I think I want to travel and wander around and enjoy my later years. And so he was looking around for someone to buy Clear Creek. And the things that were really important to him were, one, he wanted it to be someone regional, at least. He liked the idea of it being, a smaller family-owned company. And most importantly, above, I think, even the products that we make and the cachet, the integrity of the brand and what he's contributed to the spirits world, the most important thing above all of that was that the employees that he had were going to be taken care of. And so once he made the decision to sell Clear Creek, he was like, well, what's a local company that fits all those markers, and specifically one that takes care of its employees? And Hood River Distillers was really at the top of that list. Unbeknownst to Steve, at the time, Hood River Distillers, with their success of Pendleton whiskey, were growing hand over fist. And they were like, hey, what if we get back to our roots? What if we actually start controlling what we make from the raw ingredients all the way through? For those of you that don't know, Hood River Distillers was founded in 1934 by 3 transplants to the Hood River Valley from the East Coast. And they were doing the same thing that Clear Creek's essentially been doing the whole time since 1985, which is using the ugly fruit of the Hood River Valley to turn it into fruit spirits. In 1934, that meant that they were actually pulling the cull fruit out of the Hood River because, turn of the century, all the orchardists were like, this fruit's ugly and I can't sell it at the market. So I'll just throw it in the river and it'll disappear. Thankfully, nobody does that anymore, but we do have some really cool pictures down in the tasting room where it looks like you could walk across the Hood River for the amount of fruit that's actually bobbing down the river to go into the Columbia and off to the Pacific Ocean. So Hood River Distillers, they were actually taking that fruit out of the river, which at that point in time, the river was probably crazy clean, and they would wash it all off, smash it up, ferment it, turn it into brandy. In the 40s, during World War II, the United States asked any distillery if they could pretty please make industrial alcohol instead of whatever they were making for the war effort. So Hood River Distillers happily obliged and converted everything to just make industrial alcohol for manufacturing. The war ends. Hood River Distillers goes back to making fruit brandy. But at that point in time, what few people knew what brandy was on the other side of Prohibition had wandered away and gone to other brands. The drinking culture really kind of went into a pretty stark famine post-Prohibition. It's amazing how much was lost in American drinking culture, considering that Prohibition was only 13 years long. And they were having a hard time making ends meet, just making fruit brandies alone. By the mid 50s to late 50s, early 60s, that was when Hood River Distillers pivoted to being a rectifier, which would have been what they were known by in pre-Prohibition terms, which is they were buying bulk spirits and then blending and proofing them, packaging them, and creating all these different brands. Ron Dodge, with an eye for premiumization in the mid 90s, early 90s, was like, hey, these value brands have been doing us a great amount of service over the years, but we don't have a lot of, top shelf stuff. And I think that's where spirits are going to be going. And that was where Pendleton found its roots, where they came up with the idea of it. It's a blended Canadian whiskey. They co-branded it along with the Pendleton Woolen Mills and the Pendleton Roundup. So bringing a few more local things together into kind of a lifestyle brand. Pendleton whiskey takes off seemingly overnight. And then they're like, hey, so we've just been doing this blending, bottling, packaging thing, and it's worked out really well. But we came from being fruit distillers. We came from being brandy distillers and hyper local at that. So with an eye to continue the premiumization and move forward, they actually had a like check in hand to buy a still and start building their own distillery. And it's almost as, you know, as the story goes, it's almost as if they had the check and they're like, right, this is a great decision. We're excited to move forward. And they like go to put their hand on the doorknob, and then Steve McCarthy's there, and they open the door and he's like, hey, I'm ready to retire. Do you want to do you want to buy my distillery? That's an established 30-year-old brand making fruit brandies from Pacific Northwest fruits with 10 employees that are already spirits nerds and know how to do everything from all the paperwork and packaging, creation, design, selling, tasting, everything. And they were like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And they like just tore up the check and bought Clear Creek Distillery instead in 2014. So that's kind of the entire history of Clear Creek and Clear Creek's relationship with Hood River Distillers. In 2018, the decision was made to move us to Hood River out of Portland for two reasons. One, we're now way closer to the pears that we make the majority of. For Clear Creek Distillery, we process over 500,000 pounds of fruit every year and turn it into fruit brandy. And over half of that is Bartlett pears here from the Hood River Valley. So it makes a big difference being 5 minutes away from our pears versus being, 90 minutes away from our pears. So that was a big thing. And then the other was in building our own facility and moving to Hood River, we got to install Carl, who's right behind us, our beautiful, ginormous vodka still and pivot. You can get the whole column all the way up there into the very ceiling. So that was a big addition for Clear Creek, and that's where we make Timberline vodka, which brings us to why we're all here: whiskey nerds and a brandy maker talking about vodka.
Did you like that tagline for the show?
Oh my god, I genuinely doubled over laughing. Like the Garrett and Kat had just left for the day. I actually just turned the still off right before the podcast started. So the still is still going. I'm like, all right, I'm going to taste some vodkas. Let's get ready for this vodka podcast. I get buzzed on my phone. And it's like, yeah, comedy. Absolutely. Because it's fun. Talk about vodka because it's fun.
Go on, Doug.
Yeah. If you have a question formed fully, go ahead and ask.
No, I think I need to go back. I should have been taking notes throughout all that, quite honestly.
Yeah, I actually wanted to clarify a couple of things. Sure. You mentioned a brand called Michael's. Is that
Michael's of Oregon was the the company name.
So no relation to the craft store.
No,
right?
No.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for the listeners because I know I've had that question before and kind of like did a mental double take.
Yeah, no, it was.
Wait, what does that have to do?
It was an outdoor sports accessory company. So like gun holsters and like rifle slings and like fishing tackle boxes and like vests and hats and stuff. So yeah, it was like adventure outdoor sports wear accessories.
I also
his dad had started it.
I want to have just my gut reaction to I recently visited Canada and came back across the border, and one of the things I saw in the duty-free shop, of course, is Pendleton. Mm-hmm. I did not have it in my head at that moment that was actually a Hood River product.
Yeah, I actually probably should clarify. I kind of like accidentally chopped off the end of that, like the Pendleton story. I want to say it was 2016 or 2017. Pendleton whiskey, Hood River Distiller sold Pendleton whiskey, the brand, to Proximo Spirits, and Proximo owns, distilleries like Stranahan's, and they also Proximo initially and originally was formed as the support company for Jose Cuervo. So they're most well known for Jose Cuervo, but they have a number of different brands, like Kraken Rum is another one in their portfolio, Stranahan's, Lucky Number 11 or whatever, the like Irish boxer guy with an attitudes Irish whiskey.
Oh yeah. Proper 12 was it?
Yeah, that's what it is. I knew it's a number. I can never remember.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that's in good hands.
Yeah.
I didn't know about the brand back, but when it was a Hood River product, so that's cool.
I didn't know. So wait, did you say that Pendleton Woolen Mills was also associated with
Yeah.
Pendleton whiskey?
So the word Pendleton on the label, that is the Pendleton Woolen Mills brand, Pendleton, like the font and everything.
I never knew that.
And then the letter buck and the red logo on the front of it, that's the bucking horse with the cowboy on the front of it. That's the logo for the Pendleton Roundup, which is one of the more historic rodeos of the West. And really, when you talk about the rodeo circuit, one of the most historic rodeos, really. It's pretty unique in that it still has a grass like center field. So it's a dirt track with real green grass in the center and like proper grandstands. It's a dedicated rodeo ground with green grass. Which is like, that's not a thing anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. So back in the day when HRD still had Pendleton, they used to take a select group of employees would get the opportunity to go as a guest of the company to the Roundup, and I was very fortunate that I got to go before they sold the brand. And going to the Roundup is a wild ride no matter what, but it's something really special to be able to go as a guest of Hood River Distillers. We got to go behind the chutes, which is a thing that they only tolerated for Hood River Distillers, considering that they'd brought so much life back to the rodeo through the Pendleton whiskey brand. So we actually got to like go behind where all the cowboys are getting ready to go ride the bulls, which is like so dangerous, but like such a neat and weird thing that I've done. So
that's cool. Okay.
So and if you've ever seen the movie Silverado, the music for Silverado is what they play to start the rodeo every day, which is like pretty epic.
So real quick, I want to connect the dots for the listeners. We've previously had Joe O'Sullivan on as a maker of, specifically, we were talking about McCarthy's single malt. We just saw some news 3 hours ago, I think it was, that the latest McCarthy's single malt won a really big award from Whiskey Advocate. Mm-hmm. I have that here, the McCarthy's 6-year Oloroso cask finished.
Yeah, you're gonna have to hold on tight to it. I wonder how quickly it's gonna sell out with considering the news that just broke.
Make it a little bigger. Yeah, so this was rated the best American single malt, and I can't agree more.
Well, by Whiskey Advocate.
By Whiskey Advocate.
I mean, Whiskey. Thank you so much, Whiskey Advocate. If anybody from the magazine is watching, oh my gosh, we can't even right now. But I don't want to take honors that we haven't won. We're not of the world ever, full stop. And although that would be cool, but Whiskey Advocate has bestowed a pretty amazing 95 points on the Oloroso and 92 both for the 3 and 6 year McCarthy's. So.
I noticed they didn't include the PX in that lineup, which makes me wonder.
I don't know if they were sent it. I don't know.
So it'd be interesting to know how they would have rated that. But all I can say is McCarthy's is my favorite American single malt, possibly my favorite whiskey brand. And this is one of the best examples of it that I've had. And this was Garrett Trotter's very first blend.
If you didn't say it, I was going to make sure that he gets credit for it. I guess absolutely. Garrett Trotter's first fingerprints on a legendary brand, McCarthy's American single malt. I am like the proudest mama.
And bears repeating. The first American single malt, which now appears on the label, which I think was a great choice. Like you were saying earlier, the third craft distillery, but the first American single malt. And American single malt is a category in the process of being legislated. So just to connect the dots on that, we talked at length about the whiskey portfolio that Clear Creek is running right now with Joe O'Sullivan. So we don't need to rehash that right now. And I'll also say, Joe and Caitlin have told the story of the distillery quite a few times on various podcasts, and I would say all of those variations of the story are worth listening to because little fun details pop in and out. So, you know, I'm sure I'm fine with advertising other podcasts. Like you should go listen to Single Malt Matters is a good one. It's no longer active, but there's some great interviews on there. I believe you also were on Single Cask Nation, if I'm not mistaken.
I should actually get a list started of all of them because people do ask from time to time, and I'm like, yeah, I've been on some. Ask Google. Google knows what the podcasts that we've been on.
I also would love to collaborate on a list like that of like anything that is an American single malt interview on a podcast. I want to have all that in one place. For one thing, it'll help my research into American single malt for the book, but also I think that's just a fun thing for other people to have access to. Just have all that from every brand that exists all in one
I
place.
think I can probably say, all this is live stream. Maybe I shouldn't say it. Never mind. There is going to be another podcast that will be coming out shortly, but because it's live and I don't know when it's going to air, maybe I won't say what it is.
Fair. I'm hoping that this one comes out pretty soon, but we'll see because I still haven't gotten the wheels turning on an actual audio podcast.
Sure.
So yeah, soon. Anyway, so enough about McCarthy's because we've talked about that quite a lot already on the podcast, both with and without guests. I wanted to also sort of visit the rest of the Clear Creek portfolio. There's a couple of other aged whiskey products. I don't think there's any aged brandies, if I'm not mistaken. No, there is. The apple brandy. Which I actually have behind me. I pulled it out because I was like, yeah, that's going to be relevant. And of course, I gave you the bottle of I had aged the pear brandy in a rye cask for fun.
Yes,
and
I'm gonna have Garrett
try
it tomorrow. We set some time aside so that we can try some things tomorrow.
Okay,
he's only just made it back from paternity leave. Wednesday was his first day back after 3 months. So we've had a lot of catching up to do.
Congratulations to him, by the way. And I was going to say, he's getting all these accolades and he's been on leave the entire time.
It's so funny when the post went up about the 95, which, by the way, just casually, I have also been informed that that's the highest rated whiskey in the history of the Whiskey Advocate is 95 points for the McCarthy's Oloroso.
Really? That's fascinating.
So if you look at their website and you pull up American Single Malt and you look at and they organize the ratings, it is first now. So again, absolutely well done, Garrett. But I think I could safely say that he was a little bit overwhelmed by it this afternoon.
I can see why. That's a huge accolade for your first outing. So congratulations again, Garrett. So moving on to the rest of the portfolio, I wanted to ask you, what are you distilling now?
Well, hilariously, you're trying to move on, and the answer is we just finished distilling McCarthy's.
And I visited 3 weeks ago, and I didn't get a chance to try McCarthy's new make because you just weren't doing it yet.
Yeah, because we weren't doing it yet. This is starting on next Friday. We're gonna get back into the more steady, regimented. What's the distillery doing today? Oh, it's pear brandy part of the year. But usually, end of May until end of September, that's kind of the fancy dancy time of year. And so we're going from, I was running vodka we were running vodka on Carl today. We finished McCarthy's on the Clear Creek stills. We're going to do a full wash down tomorrow. Next week, we distill through the year's worth of Muscat Grappa and then crush on Thursday, crushing truck number 2 of pears. And then we start the first truck of pears on Friday. So kind of a quick turnaround on a bunch of different products, but we'll be stuck in on pears for a while. I'm hoping maybe a little bit more McCarthy's in December. We'll see.
You said trucks. How many pears are you distilling in a year?
Well, like I said earlier, we process over 1 million pounds of Pacific Northwest fruit and turn it into brandies and liqueurs for the Clear Creek brand. Just over half of that, so just over 500,000 pounds of that is Bartlett pears from the Hood River Valley. So 58,000 pounds of pears comes, I say in a single truck. It actually takes 2 deliveries to get 58,000 pounds in here. And if my microphone wasn't having, I wonder, no, I'm too far away from the door. I was gonna say, if my microphone wasn't having some shorting out issues, I would drag the computer over there because they're ripening just in the room next door. So they're all spread out across the entire distillery. There's hardly any room to breathe in the distillery when there's pears here. Sometimes I feel bad because sometimes it feels like we have this luxury of all this floor space, and I've seen so many distilleries where every square inch is absolutely accounted for, and I just have to tell them, I promise ours is that bad too. It's just comes and goes.
Yeah, so I guess for the rest of the portfolio, maybe take us backwards in time a little bit about what you've been distilling recently.
Like the calendar year?
Yeah, sure. Or however you want to go through the list. We'll narrow in on vodka.
Buckle
eventually.
up. What's the calendar year backwards? Can you do the alphabet faster? And don't ask me to do
it's
the
just to make
alphabet
sure that
backwards.
you're not lying,
So backwards from today, we try to kind of always be working on vodka. That's kind of an all year round thing. McCarthy's the last couple weeks, we processed 75,000 pounds of cherries. Before that, we had a bunch of wine that I managed to score a pretty sweet deal on. We use our neutral wine brandy for the basis for all of our liqueurs. We have an R&D project that will be based off of the wine brandy, hopefully coming out in Q1 of next year. And we also distill some wine to put away for an aged wine brandy in French oak. Then it would have been apples and plums before that, and then pears and McCarthy's kind of dotted around through there. What am I forgetting? We haven't done framboise, which is made from raspberries, in the last 12 months. And then all of the berries for the liqueurs, they mostly come in the summertime. So that's not really a distillation. We're just throwing berries in high proof grape brandy and letting them macerate for 6 or so months. But we stay busy all year round. It's a rare moment. I have a spreadsheet that the C-suite wanted me to make something very similar to it, and I was like, oh well, I already have that tool. I use it for myself, and then I pulled it up the Excel spreadsheet and showed them, and I don't think that they were prepared for the blast of color. Apparently, my brain works very similar to the aliens in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, because that's kind of the message board that they use along with the tones at the end of that movie is a approximately exactly what the tank planning calendar looks like. Everything is color coded, and so to me it makes a perfect amount of sense. Like, oh yeah, this is what we did this week, and this is that, and that is that, and this is that, and that, and then, but to everybody else that looking over my shoulder at this widescreen, they're like, you're insane. That's just a bunch of random neon colors and nonsense. That's not a schedule. That doesn't show us what you've been doing this whole time. I'm like, yeah, it does. Totally does.
Let's see. I think one you forgot was the plums.
Oh, the plums. The plums. We get so the whole balance of how we stay busy all year round, considering that there are a lot of fruits that are ripe and ready to go at around the same time, about this time, right? Pears have come off the trees, so have apples, plums, also a fall harvest. We distill things in the order that they require in order to make sure that the brandy is as perfect as the fruit is. Partly pears don't store very well, so and we need to make a lot of pear brandy. So the priority is making as much pear brandy as we can while the pears are in good shape. Apples, historically and today, store incredibly well. So apples are the ones that we're more than willing to put off until April or May if we have to. Plums, we actually get them frozen. We don't have drains or stills or equipment that are built to handle 100,000 pounds of plums and their pits. While we do have the equipment to handle the cherry pits, it's very important that the kirsch is fermented and distilled on the cherry pits. It's not as much, it can be for blue plum. Ours doesn't have that buttery, nutty quality that would come from having been fermented and distilled on the plums. But we get those Elliott pitted and they freeze. So we're able to thaw those out and kind of poke them in holes in between all the schedules. And also, I'm going to call you out officially. We're sitting here talking about fruit brandy, and I'm on the vodka podcast because someday I'm going to get to do a brandy podcast.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. Well, let's move on past. I just wanted for the listeners, I think they need to be aware of all of the various products that you have.
But when in doubt, if I have the opportunity to poke you with a stick, I'm gonna.
Yeah, totally. That's fair. I just wanted to make sure that like anybody who's watching this for the first time, like I don't think of Clear Creek as a vodka brand. We're doing this basically as a bit.
Yeah. And I think actually most importantly, you maybe you'll ask a question, but maybe you won't, but it is important for me to kind of delineate the brand structure of how all this stuff fits together. I use the solar system because we all are aware of how the solar system is put together. Hood River Distillers, HRD being the sun. I dibs Saturn for Clear Creek because let's be honest, it's the dopest planet. So Clear Creek is all of the fruit brandies. More and more through time, McCarthy's is being treated a little bit more like an independent brand. I understand why it's the first American single malt, and it's weird to have it in a lineup of a bunch of fruit brandies. So while it's really incredibly important to the brand story of Clear Creek Distillery, it's essentially the rings of Saturn. It's very important. It's very close to us. It's always going to be the top of our minds and one of our precious children, but it is increasingly treated as an independent brand. So Saturn and its rings. And then Saturn has all these really super cool moons. And those would be some of the other independent brands that come out of this facility. Clear Creek and McCarthy's together represent 26 different liquid items that come out of this distillery, but there are several different independent brands as well. So the total liquids that come out of here, including single barrel programs, is 35 actually. So things like Timberline vodka, the Lewis and Clark vodka, Old Delicious, which is a double bourbon barreled apple brandy, the Trails End line, and all of those single barrels. All of those things are independent brands, but are active, and also the De Graaf Amaro and Aperitivo, which I keep forgetting because there's so many things that we make. All of those are independent brands made by Clear Creek, but have their own story, their own life, their own creative sandbox, if you will, that we build out around those portfolios. So that's kind of how they all work together. And then Hood River Distillers also owns Captive Spirits up in Seattle, Big Gin. Alex Myers is an amazing gin distiller. He's an amazing distiller in general. I've tried some of his other R&D stuff and it's delicious. I did Neptune for him because it's the second dopest planet. And like, I got to do my buddy a solid. But Hood River Distillers has, I don't know what the total count of brands are, but we just launched a flavored Canadian whiskey line this summer with 3 flavors and a base 5-year Canadian as well called Fourth West, and the Sinfire line, which has been around for ages. All of Monarch value brands. We got a lot. Essentially, if you stayed within the Hood River Distillers portfolio, we could fill an entire bar and you'd never be wanting. There we've got rums. We've got an amazing relationship with the Casa Orendine down in Mexico. We've got a number of really beautiful tequilas that we have to offer as well as part of our brand families. So it's a pretty cool place to work when you consider the breadth and depth of what we have to offer.
Wow.
Yeah. I would have asked.
Sorry.
I would have asked. Given the breadth of spirits that you produce, why you don't have a rum, and I didn't realize actually that there is a rum under the Hood River Distiller. So it's a big brand. I mean, I have known you guys for a long time, so to say I've done my homework would be an understatement. But there's a lot to find and there's a lot to miss, I think, in the brand. So there's definitely a lot to discover there. And comment in the chat. Yet as a European, the only one I can get my hands on from HRD is McCarthy's from 2016. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not surprised by that. Although
we used
it was
to be able
huge...
to ask Joe, hey, can you get this into my locality? I guess now we have to ask you.
Yeah, now you have to ask me.
So on that note, last time I had Joe on was mere weeks before he announced his departure from Clear Creek Distillery. Mm-hmm. How has the transition been for y'all?
Well, I'm very tired. That's how I'm going to put it. I'm very tired. So as luck would have it, we're going to say that it was luck. Let's see. We actually took a photo, and I think I posted it on the Clear Creek Instagram because it was a really great photo because it was Garrett's last day here at the distillery before he left for paternity leave at the end of June. Little did we know, so I knew like 5 days later I knew, but little did we know at the time that was taken maybe like 5 minutes after Joseph had gotten a call out of the blue. Hey, would you consider interviewing for a master distiller job in Nevada? And he was like, well, okay, this is going to be a ride. And so like, I know him well enough that you can kind of look at those photos that I took and be like, yeah. And so that was Friday, or no, that was Thursday. And then by that following Wednesday, he came in on Wednesday morning and was like, hey, so I've been offered this amazing opportunity. I'm going to be leaving Clear Creek, which is crazy, but I've got to do it. And so, so all of a sudden we went from being a close-knit team of 3 to a busy team of 1. So I've been here by myself since then. We got through cherry season. I was very lucky that I was able to get volunteers for the days and the tasks that I really couldn't pull off as one person. So Malcolm McCurdy, who is the orchardist that actually grows our pear in the bottles for us. He was kind enough to come and help us with a few crushes. He helped with muscat crush. He helped with the first pear crush and cherry crush. And then we had an intern that we had hired to help cover some of Garrett's hours. And they started at the 1st of August, 1 day a week. And this week was their first full week full time. So Kat McKeldry as well has been in and out, which has been a great help. But in large part, it's been, 55-hour weeks, 6 and 7 days a week of Miss Bartlemay just doing what she can to, keep doing podcasts, keep doing interviews, keep the stills rolling, keep everything clean, keep the paperwork done, and keep the brand and the distillery and the company moving forward so that hopefully, when our new distiller starts next week and with Garrett now back in the fold, she'll get a break. But that's how the time without Joseph has been. I moved into he told me to move into his office immediately. I moved into his office immediately, and I have spent all of about 30 minutes in it in the last 3 months.
I'll take the note. I apologize for overloading you with yet another podcast, but I do really
no. This is so much fun.
That you've taken out. Maybe the vodka bit is probably for the best because we get to have a lot of fun today.
Yes. I've been genuinely looking forward to this. Like, I had a smile on my face all day today because I'm like, this is going to be so much fun.
Yeah. Full disclaimer: I may or may not have promised Joe at some point that I would try to evangelize the Timberline vodka brand because he did definitely convert me to vodka on the Timberline brand. And the most disappointing thing about that is that I have had a hard time finding it in stores.
Oh, that's too bad
which
to hear.
I've told you about that, and there's a whole distribution challenge apparently going on. Which is like a good problem to have.
Yes.
But I always love taking pictures of like when I see Hood River products on the back bar of somewhere, right? A restaurant, a bar, wherever I've gone. Or even in one case, I was in a furniture store and they had used Big Gin to dress up like a display cabinet.
If you go into an IKEA, I know there's a handful of IKEAs that have some Clear Creek things, and for like an even more ridiculous Easter egg, I know I've seen it within the last few years in the Portland IKEA, but it should be in a few Western IKEAs. My parents' now closed distillery wine bottles have also appeared in IKEAs as set up displays for furniture. So if you see a Wheat Ridge in a Nook, Wheat Ridge in the Nook bottle of wine in your local IKEA, that's my family's winery.
That's
IKEA
awesome.
sells alcohol?
No, they get bottles from the region to use as props for their set up living rooms and bedrooms and stuff. And so they'll put them in the kitchens, or they'll use them as like flower for flower pots and stuff like that, and in shelves. And
so was that just totally a coincidence, or is someone at IKEA a fan of your parents' brand?
I think they just at the time IKEA was new, and they reached out to the Gorge winemakers, the Gorge Wine Commission, and we're like, hey, we need empty bottles, and we were like, yeah, we can do that. We got lots of empty bottles, and so it was a way for each individual IKEA to have a little bit of local flavor and to include brands that the locals would recognize and make the kitchens feel more like a kitchen that they could have, not just a kitchen.
Nice. So, all right, we've been dancing around Timberline vodka long enough. I'd say it's time for the spiel. Okay,
it's spiel time. It's spiel time. I just have a clipboard because I feel like I might need to write something down. I don't know why, but I have a pen and paper for just in cases. I'm so used to taking notes during meetings that I was like, I better get my pen and paper.
I will definitely need to write things down because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know anything about vodka.
Well, I will say that I think it's really funny that Doug said that Joseph had turned you on to vodka through Timberline, because I think it would be fair to say for both Joseph and I that we also were turned on to vodka by Timberline vodka. We definitely, being, brandy and whiskey makers, and for Joseph, gin distiller as well. That when the Hood River Distillers was like, hey, we need you to make a fruit vodka. Cool. All right. You got this. We were like, vodka, just about like everybody else is. Just like realistically the joke behind us being here today. And through the process of going through and making, I think we made upwards of a dozen different vodkas, going through the R&D process, we really started to fall in love with the potential of what a vodka actually has as a neat spirit, as well as a cocktail, and how difficult and how high pressure and how very careful you have to be when crafting a truly well done vodka. It's not just as much as it gets kind of casually thrown around as a garbage spirit or something to hide with sugar and fruit. It's really genuinely difficult to make a good vodka, because it is a more lighter flavored, a more neutral spirit. And so if you have any flaws, if you have any mistakes, it's not like, oh, well, it'll vanish in blending or it'll hide through aging. There is nothing to hide behind in vodka. If you mess something up, everybody knows that you messed something up. And so it's really a high wire balancing act to be able to execute a really good quality vodka. And so through the process of making Timberline, we came to that realization. I mean, to the extent that when we're distilling it, if you let the proof get below like 191, 190.8, it gets like too soft and flabby. And there's this like weird, like candy green apple note that comes out, and it's like, it tastes weird. Conversely, if you let it get above like 192.8, which is not that far away, it's like peppery and spicy, and it also doesn't taste like Timberline. And so it's this incredibly narrow proof gap that you're kind of threading the needle through in order to make the flavor profile, what you're looking for, come out in the final bottle. And that's just on the distilling side alone. So Timberline vodka is made of grain and 14 different varieties of Pacific Northwest apples. We distill it in a pot still, which is right here next to me. It holds 500 gallons. There are 46 different plates, which means there are 46 different times that distillate turns from liquid to vapor on its way from one side to the other, coming out above 190 proof. We like to distill it just above 192 proof. In the United States, you can make a vodka out of anything, and the world around you can make a vodka out of anything. In the US, it just has to come out of the still above 190 proof. In Russia, it's 192 proof. It was way cooler a couple years ago to say that we were distilling to Russian standard. We don't generally talk about that anymore, but since this is a comedy podcast today, I'm going to say that, yeah, it used to be way cooler to say that we were distilling to the Russian standards of vodka. But now, we distill just above 192 proof as the general target throughout the day, but definitely well above the 190 proof thresholds to be classified as a vodka. And the interesting thing, I'll get into all the interesting things about vodka later. Let's continue talking about Timberline. You said you wanted a spiel. I'm going to give you a spiel.
It's a good spiel. That's why I want this.
There are so many really awesome things. I'm going to grab the bottle about Timberline vodka. One, made by nitpicky brandy makers with a mind for excellence. Everything that we do, we over deliver because that's just our nature. And if you have the opportunity to over deliver, why would you choose not to? So we like to say that, we're providing you with a $40 bottle of vodka, but it's actually only going to set you back like, $20 to $24, depending on where you're buying it. And I think as we get through this tasting and we talk more about the fine details of what a quality vodka is, I think you'll agree with me that we came through on that promise. So we've talked about where the material that it comes from, grain and apples. Let's talk a little bit more about the still and 46 different levels of rectification. When we start talking about the myth and legend of vodka, we'll talk about whether or not that counts as being 46 times distilled, or whether it doesn't. Maybe it's just only distilled the once because it starts in the pot and it ends in the tank on the other side. Maybe it's just distilled once, or is it 46 times? And then with Timberline, we really make sure that goes through at least a 1 month attenuation period. And what that means is the distilling process is really violent on the chemical structure, the molecules of what you're trying to get that alcohol out of. You're blasting it with heat and you're trying to rip it out of its substrate. And then you're putting it in this kind of like thermal chokehold, if you will, right? So you're pitting the heat of the steam against the like high cooling water on the top of your columns, and you're crushing them together, hoping that if you crush them together hard enough, what will come out is over 190 proof alcohol. But that's a really intense procedure for the molecular structure. And so when you finish distilling it, it's all kind of topsy-turvy. It's like you took a your wooden plank to karate class, you kick it in half, and then you look at the edges, and it's super rough. It's not a smooth transition. There's pokey pieces. There's little pieces that are like trying to fall off. It's not a straight line. At least if you actually broke it in half with your foot, it's not a straight line and not just one that's been already pre-cut. And so what that attenuation period allows, it allows time to kind of sand the rough edges of that broken board so that you get this nice smooth mouthfeel. You allow the water and the ethanol to figure themselves out and combine again into these larger molecular matrices over time. And that contributes to the overall mouthfeel. Plus, just like in barrel aging, whether you're aging in steel or aging in barrels, granted barrels is going to be the superior vessel to age in, but you're still getting some of that volatilization of some of the things that you might have missed in the heads or tails cuts that's going to be wafting away out of the tank. And therefore it's, improving the flavor even more. And so that attenuation period is really important to contribute to the overall complexity and drinkability of the vodka itself. After it's been at least a month, we send it down to the main bottling plant at Hood River Distillers for it to be bottled. This is where the water portion comes in. And we'll talk about it a lot when we talk about the myths and legends of vodka, but it is actually really important. With Timberline vodka, as much like many other vodkas, the bottling proof is at 80 proof, which is 40%, which means that 60% of the total volume of any bottle of vodka is water. And so when we're talking about all of these fine details when you're making a vodka, they contribute to the overall flavor and aroma, and the fact that if you make a mistake, you can't hide behind anything. You have to make sure that the water that you're using is this beautiful blank canvas to show all of your work on. Because if it was a piece of garbage, now granted, Banksy is able to create these amazing pieces of art on walls and all kinds of media, but for the most part, all of us love seeing a beautiful painting that's been offered up on a beautiful canvas, and that's really what the water is to a craft vodka, to a vodka that's been made with care. And we are very fortunate that we are able to source our water from the Elliott and Co glaciers here on Mount Hood. All of our water comes from the underground aquifer fed by those two glaciers. All we do down at the plant is remove what the little bit of chlorine that the city adds. So it's city water that goes through a charcoal filtration to remove that little bit of chlorine. And then that's it. It's really minerally neutral. It's really crisp. It's really clean. We're incredibly fortunate to have this gorgeous water that not only, that comes out of our taps, and then we also get to cut our beautiful vodka with. Because water is so crazy important and water is becoming an increasingly precious resource, it was important to us with the Timberline brand, and it's now a part of all of the spirits portfolios of Hood River Distillers, but it really started with the Timberline vodka brand, our partnership with the Freshwater Trust. The Freshwater Trust is an amazing nonprofit whose goal is to preserve and restore our fresh waterways in the Pacific Northwest and the greater Western United States. Their first big project was the Sandy River, which comes from Mount Hood and winds its way towards Portland before entering the Columbia River. It's now one of two rivers in the Pacific Northwest that actually turns out more fish than go in every year. For a quick sidestep into history, in the 1950s, the Corps of Engineers was like, well, the Sandy River keeps on flooding houses. You know what gets rid of water faster? Straight rivers. So they were like, genius, we'll get a giant bulldozer and we'll just run it through the middle of the river and straighten it out. And that water is going to whip right off the mountain and no houses are going to flood. The problem is, when you straighten out a river like that, the water does really fly off the mountain. It doesn't help with flooding. It actually makes it worse, because when you speed up the river, what happens is the underground river gets narrower. So you're not refilling all of your underground aquifers, and all the soil isn't soaking up all of that extra water. It's not slowing down long enough to get soaked up. So the underground river is much narrower, which means there's more water on top. It's going faster. which means that it's going to be warmer because it doesn't have time to cool down in the shade. And because it's going faster, there's also not like quiet little eddies and little slow spots for frogs and amphibians and fish to raise their families. So you don't have any fish. No, there, it's too hot. The trees don't want to live there. Nobody wants to live there. And your houses are still flooding. Bummer. So what the Freshwater Trust did with the Sandy River is they put in these they started these bespoke log jams to try to open up some of these like river vagaries and little side tributaries that the Sandy River used to have. And so now over the span of 10 and 12 years, it's now churning out more fish than ever before. And the animals are coming back. The fish populations are coming back. The river is cooling down. The aquifers are refilling. It's been a huge success. We make a large donation to the Freshwater Trust every year. At some point in time, the goal is that Timberline becomes such a success that terminology changes to a portion of every bottle. But there is an amount of money that is really important for Hood River distillers that the Freshwater Trust has. And so for right now, it is a single large donation that we give them every year. And then we make a point to make sure that we talk about how important their job is and what they're doing is to not only us, but for the freshwater resources of the Western United States. And they have expanded. What started as just being an Oregon project is now Oregon, Washington, California, and parts of the Colorado River. So really cool science-based, research-based, water protection nonprofit, Freshwater Trust. Go to their website. They're awesome. So that's the water portion of Timberline. And then we get to talk about the cool packaging. Ta-da! The bottle finally makes it on screen. This was styled after. Yeah, and you guys have the cutie little bottles. There are 3 different labels. We have partnered with Timberline Lodge. Timberline Lodge, being founded in 1936 as part of the Green New Deal, was a large construction, a bunch of jobs here in the Pacific Northwest to build a giant lodge on a glacier and build a ski resort on Mount Hood. It's one of the handful of ski resorts that are open all year round. So you can ski in Oregon no matter what time of year, which is really cool. So that's the Timberline Lodge branding. We've also really styled all the packaging. It's very U.S. Forest Service-esque. You probably can't see unless you have a crazy quality screen, but this is actually a fabric label. So it's a cotton twill label. You could actually tear the label off and patch your favorite hiking pants. You could patch your favorite hiking pants if you were to tear them because you had your favorite hiking vodka along with you, which is kind of a new cool feature. But more importantly, it's a really durable label. So if it's going in and out of a well in a back bar or whatever, this label will take a beating. The inks won't run, and the label being fabric is incredibly sturdy. And then the last cool part, because of the way this bottle is styled, you can fit lots of them on the shelf, which is great. But there's this big knob of glass here at the top, and it's made so that if you have a speed pourer on it and you are using it in a well or in a back bar, it's really easy to just go ahead and grab that and flip it upside down, use your bottle of vodka. Really cool packaging, really neat product. There is no part of its design, creation, and sales that hasn't had time spent figuring out how we can make this the best liquid, the best packaging, the best everything that we can. And it comes in the low price of $20 to $24, depending on where in the country that you're buying it. So depending on where you are, it's the same price or less than Tito's. But it's made here in Oregon, and it's way better than Tito's. It's 100% better than Tito's.
You're not allowed to say. Are you allowed to say that?
I think I'm allowed to say. I think of all people, I'm allowed to say that. If there is one person that gets to say that, I'm going to call dibs.
Fair. That's I guess brand rivalries are okay to publicize on podcasts.
Sure.
I mean, if the brand rivalry is with Tito's, they don't care, I think.
Yeah, they'd be like, "Oh, that's cute."
Here's a good comment I'm going to highlight. I didn't try this feature before. There it is.
Better than Tito's, and I haven't tried it yet. And there's 3 labels for the 750. I pulled the Tilly Jane, the hiker gal, because she's my favorite. The distillers, we named her Tilly Jane. Tilly Jane was a person of note within the Hood River area, hiking and natural preserve area. She's a really cool lady. Look her up online. She's got a cool story. And then there's an après skier guy, which I think is the bottle that the mini that Demi has the little old school ski jumper guy on it. And then the third label is the Timberline Lodge Ski Goose logo. And then this summer, we finally came out with a 1.75 because who doesn't love their favorite vodka in a half-gallon size format? And that's the big dog. And so that one's got a beautiful, St. Bernard. Because they always have a couple of those dogs up at Timberline Lodge with the brandy casks around their collar.
That's great.
So the half-gallon is the big dog.
Nice. There was a question a little earlier when we were talking about the attenuation period.
Mm-hmm.
Is the attenuation period on Timberline done in a steel tank?
Yes. Yep. Short answer, yes.
Yep, fair enough. I guess sometimes it's just a yes or no question.
Sometimes it's just a yes or no question.
Totally.
Yes.
I had a question I wanted to ask, but it's escaping me right now. So instead, I will repeat something I think I was told by Joe, if I'm not mistaken, some time ago, that Timberline has actually been pretty successful as a well vodka.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little on how that's doing?
I don't have sales numbers for you. Someday, hopefully, once we're back up and running with a fully trained staff, hopefully I'll have the time and that'll be part of my job to have sales numbers at my fingertips. I don't have them right now. What I can tell you from my current perspective is that I usually have 2 very large storage tanks that are always full of Timberline vodka. And that usually means that I try to have 4,000 gallons of Timberline on hand at any given time, because sometimes I don't have a lot of notice when they're like, oh my God, we gotta get more in the bottles. And so that's a pretty fair amount to bottle on our scale, 4,000 gallons of high proof. And they managed to hit me up so hard in the last month that I was all the way, I was down around 900 gallons and starting to panic. So I can tell you it's doing really well. Carl is running more days than not. So we're not to capacity yet as far as the amount of Timberline that we can crank out of this place, but we're getting there. We're working hard on it.
Since we just talked about Carl, I'll ask this question a little earlier. Do you make any other spirits on the big column still there, Carl?
Yes, we make a 100% apple brandy, which is the Clear Creek vodka, and that's 100% vodka over on Carl. We have experimented with a few other things that I can't tell you about. It's a really cool still in that it's kind of a Swiss Army knife when it comes to the things that we could potentially do with it on this scale. It has a manifold. I think I can pivot the computer up high enough where you can see it. So there in the corner of the screen, you can see it's manifold, and then we'll go all the way to the top of the columns again. What that manifold allows us to do is we can choose to use this still as a pot still, just like the Clear Creek still. So a hybrid pot still that's short 4-window column. We actually have a jumper, so we could jump that column too if we wanted to and use it as a straight just pot still with no further rectification. And then with that manifold, we can choose to use one or both of those taller columns, depending on what we wanted to do. So maybe someday we'll come out with a couple different kinds of vodkas. I don't know, but we can do a crazy amount of stuff with this still as it's built right now, as far as manipulating what parts of the equipment we're using and the kind of flow rates that we're using, the amount of heat we're adding, all that kind of stuff. It's a really incredible and very versatile still.
On the note of the relationship with the water, I just wanted to highlight, this is one of the reasons that I absolutely love craft spirits, because you really do, in craft distilling, more often than not, you're thinking about absolutely every factor in, about, and around every product that you make, which is just not something that you're going to get from a huge operation that is basically just an industrial alcohol plant.
We're actually so picky that the distillery, the distillery and the main bottling plant, both in Hood River, Oregon. The distillery is in the back, as I like to say. The main bottling plant is down on the waterfront. We're actually on 2 separate water sources, given our large, but really also small geographical difference between the plant and the distillery. And so we actually bring the water up from the plant for our cutting water for all of the barrel aged spirits as well. That's how picky we are.
So all of the spirits use the same excellent water.
Yes, all of the Clear Creek spirits, all the Trails Ends, all the Monarch brands, everything. We're very fortunate to use the same beautiful water for.
And not just for cutting, right? That's going to be the water that goes in if you add any water to the fermentation process, right?
Yeah, if we were to add water with all the Clear Creek brandies and everything, it's just fruit and yeast. So without processing water or cutting water, we would essentially have no need for water. Well, we'd have to clean, but yeah, the lion's share of the water use is going to be processing water and cutting water.
I was thinking mainly about the mash for McCarthy's.
Oh yeah, well, so I don't know. I'm assuming Double is probably on the same water source as the plant, considering that they're like a quarter mile away from the main bottling plant. But it is important to note with the McCarthy's that we still work with brewing partners, which is a pretty healthy tradition within the American single malts category. It's really difficult. It's really expensive to start a brewery, let alone a brewery and a distillery. And so it's pretty common throughout the history of American single malts for the distilleries to have the stills and distilling in barrels, and then work with brewery partners that have all the grain handling equipment and everything to brew their first washes for a few years, or like us for 20 something years, and then leave the distilling for the distilling team. So
there was a further request for clarification. Can I swim in the attenuation tank?
I would not. Let's see how.
I believe that would kill you.
How blue can I get on this podcast? I would not suggest it. I have had alcohol in places. I do not suggest it. It is not as fun as you think it is.
Oh no.
After working in a distillery for 13 years, I've been covered in just about everything. On the Brandy podcast, I'll tell you about the infamous paste pants, when I was covered from head to toe in about an inch thick of fermented pear mash. That's a good time. I carry spare clothes in my office and also a spare set in my car, because you just never know. And I've had to use them both before.
Oh no. Oh my.
That sounds like a fun story for another time. And let's leave that as a teaser.
Hey, I'm just doing nothing but salting this podcast with teasers for the Brandy podcast.
Yeah, that was pretty much the agreement. You're totally not doing the vodka podcast under duress, and we totally didn't say publicly that we would hold the Brandy podcast ransom. Didn't do that at all. Yeah, go
speaking
ahead.
of the vodka podcast, it has been an hour into the vodka podcast, and I have not yet tasted any vodka.
Yeah, I do have a suggested tasting order, and I hope that neither of you have managed to crack the bottles that I sent, because it's going to be way more fun if you guys get to try them live on camera.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Fantastic.
We just got a question about cocktails, which I think we'll leave until after we do the tasting, if you don't mind.
Yes, because we want to talk about why vodka is actually really cool from the perspective of a brandy maker and whiskey nerds. Why it's worth actually taking the time on tasting through some vodkas, and why it doesn't deserve to be mistreated and maligned as it is as a category.
I have one more question about flavor before we get into tasting, just for the context. You talked about a lot of the stuff. You talked about the ingredients that go in, and a lot of the stuff that you do in the actual distillation process. Can you tell us something about flavor development that happens before you distill?
Is that your yeast question? Are you hinting at a yeast question?
I'm trying to vaguely allude to my yeast question.
Sure, absolutely. I can't tell you about the yeast that we use because it's proprietary. But I will say that, when you're talking about vodka, and it will come up, I hope a lot as we do the tasting, but especially as people are getting more interested in what a high quality vodka is, what a premium vodka is, what a vodka made with care and consideration is, trying to find a way to educate themselves, their friends, the world, on what is a flavorful vodka that isn't flavored, right? Because the world has this misconception that vodka is supposed to be flavorless. and it shouldn't be flavorless. It should be something that you celebrate. It maybe won't be celebrated as much as whiskey is or brandy, but it still deserves to be celebrated. There's a lot of effort there, and because it's so carefully crafted, your yeast selection is absolutely important. The what you're making it from is super important. That those fermentations are executed well, that they are clean, the kind of still that you're using. It's called, I think we call it the rainbow speech. To try to make people to help people understand, make people understand, to help explain to people so they understand the difference between a batch distillation and continuous distillation. What we're doing here with Carl is a batch distillation. So if you were to, Roy G. Biv, the colors of the rainbow, the hearts of the distillation is going to be yellow for this example. And if we were to load Carl with a whole rainbow, jam it in there, close the door, turn the steam on. Red being the most volatile, purple being the least volatile. As it heats up, the red will go up through the column and will start coming out as heads cuts. We're going to smell and be like, wow, this smells red. It smells horrible, like envelope glue and nail polish remover. And then you keep smelling. You're like, it's starting to smell a little bit better. I maybe smell a little bit of the color orange in here. And then all of a sudden you're going to smell it and taste it. And you'll be like, oh, that's yellow. You're going to move the parrot over, and you're going to collect only yellow. You're going to distill for quite some time. You're going to taste it along the way. Pretty soon you're going to be tasting it and you're going to be like, I don't know, is it just me, or is it starting to taste like envelope glue? I think it's starting to taste like envelope glue. And then whoosh, you collect in tails. That's when it starts to turn, quote, the color green, not physically the color green, but for the analogy, the color of the rainbow, it goes from yellow to green and then to blue. And then those are going to be the colors that are going to be in your tails. So what you're getting with a batch distillation is the purest cut of yellow. You're going to like sun gold yellow in this tank. When you're talking about continuous distillation, you have like a really big column. We're going to really simplify it, and we're going to say it's one really big column that's just windows from floor to ceiling. And somewhere around a third or halfway up that column is going to be where your feed stream is, where your whole rainbow is going to be going inside of that still. And the heat comes in the bottom, and the heat is going to be separating those colors by volatility. So towards the top of those windows, you're going to be red. Towards the bottom of those windows, it's going to be more purple. And you're going to look up and down those set of windows, and you're going to find the yellowest window. And that's going to be where you're going to pull your product stream by. The reason batch distilling is always going to be better than continuous is because while you're still going to be pulling your product stream from the yellowest window in that continuous still, there's always going to be red that's going up through that yellow window on the way to the top of the still. And there's always going to be purple that's falling all the way back down through that yellow window, which means that while it's the yellowest window, it is not the yellowest possible cut that you could be getting out of that material. So when we talk about batch versus continuous, batch is always going to be the cleanest cut versus continuous. That's not to say that there's something distill when the continuous still is bad. And when you really complicate what a continuous vodka still could be, that you might have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different separate columns that are changing the proof of the liquid, changing where the heat source is, all that kind of stuff to further and further refine that spirit as it makes its way through that to make it the purest cut of rainbow yellow. But for a simplified version of what the difference between those two things is, that's what the difference is.
I would love to dig into this. Thank you. Sorry, I should.
No worries.
Thank you. I just learned a whole lot about. I've heard it before, but like it's so much information that like my brain is still just like moving on to the next thing instead of stopping the process. You know what I mean?
Sorry.
Like, no, that's great. This is, I think, the second or third time that I've heard that spiel, and I take a little bit more out of it every time. And now that it's on tape, I can listen back to it, and that's great.
Yeah.
Because I still have to be in host mode a little bit.
Oh no, that's totally fair.
What the next thing that I'm going to ask is, and I'm also looking at the comments here. I wanted to highlight this point that you made: flavorful vodka that isn't flavored. And first of all, I think that's a great point to highlight because the first time I mentioned the Clear Creek portfolio to my parents, I was talking about the pear brandy, and Dad's first reaction was, be careful, because sometimes pear brandy means, brand or vodka flavored with pear or something along those lines. And I said, no, I've seen the pears, and I know that it's like, this is like actually brandy distilled from pears, not
As a side
straight
note,
brandy flavored with pears.
in the history of Clear Creek, we did try to make a RPV, real pear vodka. That was one of Steve's last big projects, and I can tell you from experience that no matter what you do to pears that have been fermented and all the different ways that you can distill it, it is physically and literally impossible to separate real pear essence from the pears in the brandy from the brandy. You can't do it. We tried everything for years. We tried multiple redistillations, carbon filtrations, reverse osmosis filtrations, you name it. We threw everything at it. It just tasted like pear brandy.
If that story was ever going to show up on this podcast, the vodka episode has got to be the place for it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was a much longer version of that, dare I say, may have gone a little unhinged that I got when I visited the distillery a few weeks ago.
Yep. But we still haven't tried any vodka, so I'm really trying to speed us towards actually getting you guys to taste some vodka, because I can sit here and chat with you for ages. Yeah. But we did promise that you would try some. So go ahead.
We have 6 vodkas.
The Belvedere.
Yeah, just to set the stage for anyone who didn't see my various Instagram posts.
Oh, right.
We've got six vodkas that are all made from different raw ingredients. They are not flavored vodkas. So when we talk about Timberline as an apple vodka, it's not a flavored vodka. It's a vodka made from apples, and so on down the line. In case we mix up that terminology, all of these vodkas are not flavored, and the goal here is to see if we whiskey nerds can, with the guidance of a brandy distiller, tell the difference from one of these vodkas to another.
Oh, I'm so excited.
All right. Now, with no further ado, because it's been an hour and 10 minutes, let's get into it.
Oh no, I have a question about this vodka in particular.
Well, let's get it in the glass.
So Belvedere, this is rye. This is your rye base. So while you guys are smelling and tasting, I'll do a quick, a very, very short history of vodka. A lot of people assume that vodka is supposed to be made from potatoes. When we talk about dispelling all the myths and legends about vodka, that's pretty close to number one on the list of nope, doesn't have to be made from potatoes. And then we remind them that hey, casually, potatoes are a new world food. They actually came from Peru, and so potatoes actually didn't make their way through Europe and towards Poland and Russia until late 15, early 1600s, I think, is when they landed in Spain. And it wasn't actually starting to get used to make spirits until the late 1700s to mid 1800s in Poland. So traditionally, when you go back to the Russian history of vodka, vodkas were the best vodkas, the vodkas that the czars were drinking, that they were sending to other royalty to say, like, oh, look at the kind of amazing alcohol we drink on a regular basis. It was rye vodka. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start with the Belvedere, because it's rye. All right, so whiskey nerds.
The very first thing I got when I opened up that bottle and got a little bit on my hands was that it smells a little bit like bread dough.
Mm-hmm. I hope you guys have enough glasses to have all of these lined up, because that's going to be very important that we have. Okay, great.
I won't try to move my camera around, because that would
no, don't move me. Okay. I gotta keep bumping that. I know it looks super classy, the stills, having the stills in the background, but I'm just like kind of propped up on a barrel head, so I keep hitting it with my knees.
Yeah, I did the same thing. Like I'm just like, I've got to get this on my hands. Like I was normally I would have something in my glass for the entire podcast, but I decided that today, more than any other day, I should start with as neutral a palate as possible. In fact, all I've had to eat today was yogurt at breakfast at like 11 o'clock.
Demi.
So
shame on you. I had a sandwich at about 4.
I just, for the good of the tasting, I wanted to make sure that I had the best possible, cleanest palate, so that I could smell and taste clearly the vodkas.
So yeah, there's a sweetness to it. It's got some like bread dough qualities, but you can get some of those. I at least get some of those like musky kind of menthol notes that you sometimes get with the rye. Like when you take eat a piece of rye bread, and you get that kind of like perfumey like aroma that fills the negative space of your mouth. Like there's a little bit of that kind of mentholy, musky, perfumey kind of rye note in it. It comes off mostly with the sweetness of the ethanol, but I think as we go through all of these vodkas, you'll be able to come back to this one and be like, oh, okay, yeah, there is definitely something that's different there. And I think I could attribute that to the fact that it's made from rye.
Yeah, there's
Musky
something
is, I think,
go ahead.
right. One of the things that I'm not getting in this, which I found that I get from a lot of rye distillates, be they new make or whiskey, as it were, is dill. I usually get dill in rye, and I'm not getting it right now, which is kind of interesting.
However, if you think about it, a little dill pickle in the vodka, it's a good time.
Oh, no,
Demi knows. Demi, did we make you do a pickleback while I was up there for Seattle Cocktail Week? That was like the theme of Timberline being at Seattle Cocktail Week was the Bartlemay
I
pickleback.
definitely did a pickleback. I don't know
Super
whether
good.
it was coercion or voluntary.
Hey, you know what? I had one on during Seattle Cocktail Week. I think the earliest pickleback I had was like 9 a.m. So like, it's a thing. You'll be fine.
My word.
And let me just say on the note of Seattle Cocktail Week, if you've never gone out partying with distillers, they go hard.
Yeah, you say that about distillers, but here's the thing: if distillers say that about sales teams.
And to be clear, that comment was addressed at my audience, not at Caitlin, because I was drinking with Caitlin. So she knows.
Yeah, but I've been drinking with our sales team, and good Lord.
They seem like they know how to party too.
Yeah, they know what's up. All right, so that's the Belvedere.
There's some kind of high note here that's not something normally I would describe as something like a shiny grain whiskey note or something like that in vodka. It's not that. It's something nicer. But
there's definitely a sparkle to it, right? There's a brightness to it. Like it's acidity without being like overtly acidic.
Yeah, it's not quite floral or like acetone or anything like that, but it's something volatile and yes, shiny.
Yeah.
So I'll come back to that and see if I can figure out what that is.
Yeah, no, realistically, like in going through all of these, it's really important that we circle back around to the Belvedere, just because the first one, without context of the different flavors and aromas that you're going to get, doesn't really get a fair shot at how different and how interesting this tasting will be. So the next one is the Chopin, the potato vodka from Poland.
Ooh, lovely.
Belvedere also from Poland.
Oh, there it goes.
Oh, that's it. Ian, you're fired.
Take, don't.
So I will say the first vodka that made me like care even a little bit about vodka was when I switched from Smirnoff to I went into a liquor store. I think it was a Specs, and I asked for a recommendation. I wanted something that wasn't like as harsh. And the person that I asked said like my daily drinker vodka, and that was the first time I'd heard the term daily drinker, which was like, you drink vodka every day? What? So my daily drinker vodka was Polish potato vodka called vodka Monopolowa.
Oh yeah.
Monopolowa. Yeah, I do like that stuff.
That's been my go-to favorite vodka for a while.
So the vodka, the vodka of my early 20s was the Smirnoff triple distilled red label. In fact, my 21st birthday was my dad and I going fishing on the farm that I grew up with, and he just he had a half gallon of Smirnoff, and it was half full, and he topped it off with orange juice and just like gave it a shake, loaded it on the 4-wheeler, and away we went. And that was my 21st birthday. Fishing with Dad. So here we go. The Chopin potato vodka. Very different, right? So
dare I say it smells like a russet potato skin?
Yeah. So
okay,
when
no,
you talk about the fermentation,
Go
ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was actually the thing I ate today instead of yogurt or a sandwich was right before the podcast started. I roasted a bunch of potatoes and just had those just to fill up my stomach with something. Right before it started. It smells a lot like that. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yep. I also, I get just like a touch of like butyric acid. Like there's an earthy kind of butyric acid note to it, which is like your Parmesan, your vomit, whatever. When you talk about the fermentation of potatoes, potatoes are very starched. They're mostly water. They have to have enzymes added to the fermentation because they don't have anything that's going to break those starches down into fermentable sugars in order to actually make alcohol. But potatoes are from the ground. And so whether you're using whole potatoes and doing it the traditional way where you're cooking or steaming them, smashing them, adding enzymes or adding malted barley to it in order to convert those starches to sugar, and then slowly adding water and yeast as it ferments, or The better way to do it, the less stinky way, but still pretty stinky way, is using potato flakes and water. Now that we have like modern food production facilities, it's still, according to Joseph, I've never done it, but Joseph has distilled a couple different kinds of potato mashes, and from his description, the smell is horrific. And some of the horror is going to be like things like butyric acid that are gonna add to the charm of not necessarily the best smelling mash. But I do get, there's a really nice round mouthfeel. That sparkle that we were getting the Belvedere is not there anymore, but you're getting a lot more like rich, earthy tones that kind of come along with the creamy texture with the potato vodka versus the sparkly notes on the Belvedere.
I can for sure tell that they're different. Like they're surprisingly different. I don't think I've ever side-by-sided vodkas from different raw ingredients before.
Yeah, most people haven't. And to be honest,
I don't cited vodkas before. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people who will like, oh, like let's grab vodkas from different price points and see if we can guess which one's more expensive. And like, okay, that's maybe a fun thing to do, but like vodka's so much marketing in the price.
Yeah.
But
I remember my first good vodka,
this like structured. Let's see if we can find like all of the edges and corners of what vodka flavor profiles can be, and then see if we can tell them apart. Definitely tells a different story. Like
I will say the price point
these tastes
on the four name brands that I did so not the HRD and not the Timberline, the Chopin, Belvedere, Ciroc, and Haku. Those are all very similar. They're all in the mid 30s, with Timberline being $20 to $24 and HRD vodka, I think, don't quote me, but I want to say it's probably like $12 in Oregon. Maybe it's $14 in Oregon. But the competitive set that I brought, they're all between 33 and with Ciroc being the most expensive at $36 a bottle here in Oregon.
So it's a pretty fair comparison on price, which is also a nice feature of this tasting. Here's an interesting fact. Palatop says that Smirnoff is basically North British new make. And by North British, I assume you mean North British, the grain whiskey distillery. Is that correct?
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
So that's also cool to know.
I think it's actually made in the U.S., or at least they have a very prominent U.S. facility amongst probably the many facilities that they have to have in order to make the volume that they make.
I wonder if that varies from locality to locality, because Smirnoff is such a big brand.
It might.
So the next one is
North British.
Haku. I think I'm saying that correct.
I'm very excited about this one.
So this is going to be the Japanese rice vodka.
Do we know if this is 100? So all of these are 100% of each of these grains?
If I'm to believe the bottle, yes. Belvedere doesn't say rye on the bottle, but it is they're well known and on their website as a rye vodka. The Chopin makes a potato, a rye, and I believe a wheat vodka. And so I could have just stayed all within one brand, but I didn't think that was going to be fair. So I picked 4 different brands to go across for science.
For science. The paper cap liner fell out of this cap.
Oh dear. I'm getting a bit of,
wonder if I can get that back in.
Bird feed on the nose.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have nailed that quite, but like there's something like poppy seed-ish or something like that. Like the stuff that shows up on an everything bagel. Birdseed captures that very well.
I think if memory serves, this has got a bamboo char filtration. Yeah, bamboo charcoal filtration on this as well.
Ooh, very fancy.
So that's going to contribute potentially some roasty green notes as well.
So it wouldn't be totally neutral, the charcoal.
No, I doubt it. I mean, no charcoal is neutral.
That's a topic I'd love to dig in a little bit more. It doesn't come up in American single malt at all.
You
so
and
it's
me
not
both.
Something I'm researching, but like, yeah.
I think to me with this, like the nose is great. It's really clean. To me, the big difference is the mouthfeel on this one. There is an overt chewiness to the mouthful of to the mouthfeel of this, like a chewiness that you would expect out of a grain. I mean, this is a grain spirit, but out of an aged grain spirit.
Yeah, it's very full bodied. Like almost creamy or oily. But like,
it's very, very lovely.
There's no way something distilled to 190 proof is like truly oily.
And yet,
it does have that mouthfeel.
3 very specific, very different like aromas, flavors, and also mouthfeels between rye, potato, and now rice.
Has there been a difference in proof on each of these, or are they all hanging right around 40?
Yep, they should be 40%. I'll double check real quick. 80 proof. I would be really surprised if they weren't 80 proof.
Yeah.
Yeah, Genji comments, I didn't know that rice vodka was a thing. To be honest, I didn't either, but it kind of makes sense. Anything that you can get starch out of, you can turn into alcohol. So,
and more importantly, for vodka, you can make vodka out of literally anything. This is where I'm going to go ahead and highlight. Now that I get a chance to highlight, then there it is. Misadventure Vodka down in San Diego, California. I talk about them on almost every tour at Clear Creek Distillery because they're awesome. They are using expired convenience store food and turning it into vodka. They have a specialty grinder that is usually only and solely produced for waste disposal at landfills that separates food material from packaging material, except for they have it at a distillery. And so they throw in clamshells of cookies and bags of Wonder Bread. And on one side is torn and shredded wax paper, plastic and hard plastic and cardboard. And on the other side, piles of weird food that is full of sugar. They wet it down. They add yeast. That has to also be a horrific smell. And then they distill it in a still very similar to our Carl still and make Misadventure Vodka. If you're ever down in San Diego, it's worth a stop. I love the idea behind using expired C-suite foods to make vodka, but it's a great example to say that you can make vodka out of anything. It just has to come out of the still above 190 proof in the United States.
I was just in San Diego, and I might have gone if we had this conversation last week. But I also don't know if I could have convinced my wife to go along with going to a distillery that makes vodka, let alone vodka out of things that you wouldn't eat anymore.
See, our next question right here from Queese. By the way, hello, Queese. Welcome to the podcast. Toilet paper vodka?
If you can get sugar out of it, then sure.
That's an interesting question. Can you get starch and sugar out of cellulose, which is basically,
what toilet
paper is?
Science. Sure.
Oh, that's right. I thought this sounded familiar. Niall Red distilled toilet paper once. He did.
Huh.
Cool.
He made alcohol from toilet paper. That's
I
right.
did see a video of I think it was a perfumer that made, but perfumeries and distilleries kind of hand in hand in a lot of ways made an essence of old book, and I was like, that's hot. That's smoking hot. I don't know the worldwide acclaim of an eau de vie of old book, but I do know a subset of nerds that would be all for it.
Me. That's me. I'm one of them.
Yeah, me. All right, next is the Timberline.
All right.
Timberline's not coming last. Interesting.
Timberline's not coming last.
Oh, wow.
Right? This is your...
Oh, no, Doug is gone.
This is a great time
This is my
for
first
Doug to
time
freeze.
trying Timberline vodka, however. Oh, you're back, Doug.
Wow. Didn't look like anything happened on my end, so that's fun.
So
Cool.
again,
Right.
Timberline made from grain and 14 different varieties of Pacific Northwest apple. You get, we like to say it's like a very slightly floral, very slightly herbaceous, kind of like if you were to like crush a bunch of apple blossoms. That's kind of the note. You get almost like a subtle hint of maybe oxidized apple as well. But you get that nice crystalline, shiny grain finish on it as well. And then a little bit of like nice, clean slate. I mean, we're tasting these this is room temperature neat vodka. And yet it's totally
It's not normally how one drinks vodka.
Sure. But also like totally sippable, right?
It is, yeah. This is buttery, like really buttery on the nose.
Almost like, no, hear me out on this. It has a vague hint of movie popcorn.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
I can see where you're getting that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly the kind of buttery note that I'm talking
It's like
about.
smooth on the palate, but at the same time, it kind of like turns up that sparkle on the outside edges of your tongue.
This is also a lesson in subtle tasting today.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's not gonna like grab you by the throat and smack you around in the face. But like these flavors, these aromas, they are present. And when you talk about how precise and how delicate vodka making is, can you imagine if you work so hard to get all these flavors and then you use like a weird water for it, or if you had a fermentation that went sideways, you would be able to taste it. You would be able to smell it. That would change and affect the mouthfeel of the drink as well.
Yeah.
So you have to, there is no, I didn't get any sleep last night. I guess I'm going to just kind of like shoot from the hip and do my best on the vodka distillation. Like you have to be on your A game from
Here's a new
start to
product
finish.
idea for you, Caitlin.
Oh my goodness.
You have a customer that would drink movie popcorn vodka, and I think that there really is going to be a market for that, and if that's something that you were so inclined.
Hey, you know what? They can get some, I'm sure like Burnett's or whatever that brand is probably made a movie popcorn vodka. If there's a whipped cream vodka from Smirnoff and a gummy bear vodka from like Burnett's, I'm sure during the early 2000s flavored vodkas craze, someone out there made a movie popcorn vodka.
The first time I tasted Timberline, I think that my brain was really detecting apple.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really getting that so much today, other than like maybe a very dry green apple, but only a hint. That butteriness in the nose and in the mouthfeel is really, it's not as round as the, it was the rice vodka that was really round, right? It's not quite as round as that.
Actually, I think I would say the potato is probably the roundest in the mouth because the rice still had kind of some sharp edges that are really nice. The potato vodka is almost creamy.
Against the Timberline, you can definitely taste the butyric in the Chopin.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. That's why I wanted to, when we get back to the other end, we're going to come back around to the Belvedere because the Belvedere didn't really get the purest shot of the conversation considering we started with it. Once you get into a few of them, it's like, oh, wow. Okay. Now that I've had a few, these are incredibly different.
Yeah. I would go so far as to say, like, I don't know that I would be able to put a price point on any of these, right? They're all vodka. The fact that they are all the same price point just like removes that from the conversation. But like,
well, I will say because I'm here to mostly talk people into how awesome Timberline is. Timberline is, $10 to $14 cheaper than some of these other big brands that we're enjoying as well. So we're mostly sticking around the like mid 30s price point, with the Timberline being by far the cheapest at like $20 to $24 a bottle.
Yeah, and I wish you
hadn't. Yeah, I wish you hadn't actually told me how much the Timberline vodka was, because like out of a
Thank you, Sailor Graph. Potatoes are in fact round.
No, yeah, because on a blind tasting, as of everything, I'll save my my opinions of the corn vodka next.
Yeah, we still have two more. We're gonna go ahead and change gears into the HRD vodka, which is your corn vodka. I will say that this is corn vodka. It's also a grain neutral spirit, right? This is going to represent a significant amount of the vodkas that are out on the market, craft or not, being a corn-based vodka.
I was going to say, I'm expecting this to feel familiar.
Yeah, absolutely. This will feel familiar. If you're from the Pacific Northwest, it'll smell like college. Hopefully, at least it'll smell like college. I hope it doesn't smell like anything younger than college. One of the things that we love about HRD vodka, especially when you're talking to anybody that grew up here in the Pacific Northwest, is it doesn't have the reputation for being the world's finest vodka. However, everyone, whilst maybe saying with a grimace, "Ooh, HRD vodka," will also still have a giant smile on their face because it does come with its own bevy of the first entrance into drinking and the stories that are acquired during that shallow time of life.
As a note in favor of my palate, I accidentally poured the wrong of the remaining two samples.
Uh-oh.
And I smelled it and I said, "There's no way that is HRD vodka."
So you poured the Chopin?
The Ciroc.
Or no, Ciroc. The Ciroc. Yeah. Now you know why I'm saving it till last. Don't spoil it for Ian.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to say anything. But I'm going to be definitely honest. Stark.
On my first smell of the HRD vodka, I didn't get anything. I don't know if my nose has been burned out a bit. I may need to
If
give it a
your
break
nose
for a
has,
second.
I'll give you a really quick trick.
Yeah.
So your nose will actually get tired. You walk around all day not smelling yourself because your nose is like, we know what you smell like. You don't need to be distracted by that. We're going to be telling you all these other new smells that you're being bombarded with. So the quickest and easiest way, and the thing that we always have access to, is ourselves. So take a big, deep smell of your shoulder, because that will rebalance your nose. It'll remind your nose like, oh, right, that's what I smell like. It'll give you kind of a feedback, and then you can return to the glass, and then you won't just be getting the burn of the ethanol anymore, because you'll be getting rid of some of the nose blindness that you were acquiring.
Excellent.
Kind of a cool thing that I learned from from reading perfumery books is you can actually use that nose blindness in your favor if you're going between two samples and you're like, they're so similar, I can't quite tell what's different, but there's definitely something different. You can blind yourself on sample A and then smell B. You're not going to smell any of the things that it has in similarity with A. You'll only be able to smell what's different in B between A, because you can use that blindness into your advantage. It's a fun perfumer trick.
Back when I would do wine tastings and things like that, I'd always bring a big bag of like coffee beans or something like that along with me, because it doesn't look great when you like go to the side and sniff yourself.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
Coffee beans are like the Cadillac of resetting your nose blindness. But in a pinch, if you don't happen to have coffee beans in your pocket, especially if you're doing a bunch of sensory, at work or whatever like that, you just.
And there are a lot of whiskeys, the kind that I like to drink, American single malt, that tend to have coffee notes as well. So coffee could work against you there.
Yeah, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, this smells like ethanol to me. This smells like what vodka smells like.
This is the kind of vodka that may or may not have gotten vodka as a category. It's bad rep. But there's still a mouthfeel, there's still a flavor, and ethanol in itself, when distilled cleanly, has a sweet flavor to it.
It does.
This might be the corn speaking to me, but I think this is very reminiscent of bourbon to me, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't have any of like the typical bourbon flavors to it, but like that texture that's there.
Yeah, you're missing the vanilla, the caramel, the toffee, the dark chocolate, the fatty nuts, all of the stuff that makes bourbon a lot of fun. But the backbone,
it has a bit of Coca-Cola on the palate.
It does. Diet Coke.
Totally. Yeah, Diet Coke. Yeah, Diet Coke.
So like aspartame, maybe. We're getting aspartame.
All right. I'm not going to say best for last. I'm not going to say that any of I'm going to say Timberline is the best of all of these, because that's what I'm here for. But the last one in the set is going to be the Ciroc. It's the most different out of all of them, which is why I saved it for last. We smelled and tasted it, and I was like, oh crap, did I accidentally buy a flavored vodka off the shelf? And I thought I didn't. And I looked very thoroughly all over the bottle, and it just says vodka distilled from fine French grapes, Ciroc vodka, imported, 5 times distilled. It is made from grapes. Very different.
I feel like there's a vintner somewhere rolling over.
Bro.
Fine French grapes.
Caitlin is having that same reaction right now.
Yeah. No. Yeah. We behind the curtain, we tried all of these at about 3:00 this afternoon. Garrett and Kat and I was like, all right, here we go. Time to line it up. Get ready. And each and every one of us, as we tasted and smelled this glass, we're like, whoa.
You didn't send me a bottle of Sprite or something like that, right?
I know, right? There's like, it's like lemon.
It smells like lemon pledge.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's a very specific foaming glass cleaner that this smells like from my childhood, because when you're a kid and you grow up on a farm, you start working at a very young age. I think I was probably working alongside my dad at like 6 or 7. And when you're 6 or 7, you do a lot of cleaning windows.
Hey.
And there's this very specific foaming window cleaner that I remember what the can looks like. I don't remember what brand it is. But this is what it smelled like when you sprayed it on a hot window in the sunshine.
And in the same vein, there was this stuff that my grandfather always used to keep out in his garage. It was a drain cleaner called Goop. Lemon Goop.
Well, careful.
But aside
now. That's
from
Gwyneth Paltrow's brand now.
Yeah.
Oh,
but
it
aside
is,
from using, various industrial cleaners to talk about this flavor. It does have a really fruity, floral, very citrus, like heavy on the lemon peel, maybe even a little bit of yuzu, right? Like various, yellow citruses in
And
here.
Diet Sprite.
Diet
really is
Sprite.
More of the same. Yeah.
It really is quite wonderful in flavor.
No,
Yeah,
it is not bad. It's good. But when you talk about the differences, this one is the most different.
It's
Totally.
by far.
It's from grapes, and like, okay, with a white wine, sometimes you get those like citrusy, like strong citrus notes sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and I unfortunately didn't do enough homework to be able to pull exactly what grapes they're talking about. But to be honest, like considering that we've got a tank full of muscat grapes that have just recently fermented that we're about to distill into muscat grappa, there is a lot of these citrusy, zesty, fruity, floral, musky, perfumey notes in that kind of grape. And so if a muscat type grape, white wine grape was part of the grapes that were used in this, 100% I can see where all these flavors and aromas come from.
I would, yeah.
So
but
I'm not
again,
getting
this
grapes,
is
which
a flavorful vodka that is not flavored, which is really hard when you're talking about educating a population on the depth of character that you can find in a neat sip of really well crafted vodka.
Yeah, if you think that's hard, try explaining to a bourbon drinker what American single malt means.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know how hard it is. I actually recently totted up how many years I've been tasting people on things. Because when I was a kid, I wasn't able to pour wine at the winery in the tasting room that was by our house because it was behind a bar, right? And I was under 21. However, I was allowed to do in-store tastings. So they would load me up in a pickup full of wine and send me to a grocery store in Portland as a 17-year-old. And I would be tasting random Portlanders and trying to explain to them the difference between a Cab Sauv, a Barbera, a Chenin Blanc, and a Chardonnay in the middle of a Fred Meyer grocery store. And so I've been
without tasting it,
trying to teach people the story and the quality and the effort behind really, really well-made alcoholic beverages for 20 years now, which is weird to say, but it's true.
Okay, there's something about this that is like stale corn chips.
Okay, wait, give me a second.
Like, I don't know.
And we're still on the Ciroc.
Still on the Ciroc. There's something fainty about this one. The other ones, I don't expect vodka to be particularly not fainty. Like, I expect vodka to have flaws, generally speaking. Like, as far as if you were gonna make a really flavorful, so going back to this comment from earlier, aren't things like poitín and whiskey new make in a similar boat as flavorful vodka that isn't flavored? With the exception of the distillation proof, I think that's basically true.
I mean,
vodka
but the lower the proof,
high,
the more congeners you're going to have, which means the more congeners means the more flavor, the more aroma.
Yeah. And you can be a little more careful with your cuts and all that sort of stuff, but clearly you nailed that with Timberline. So
yeah, but when you're talking about flavor or flavorless, if you're used to drinking Kool-Aid and then you start drinking craft tea is just going to taste like dirt, right? But for those of us that enjoy tea,
favorite part of it.
There's a lot of really wonderful flavors and aromas in tea.
I don't get it.
No, sure, right? But that's the comparison. And so when you're talking about it, it depends on where you are in this spectrum of flavor, with something like Mountain Dew being on one side, and then something that's really quiet, like a craft vodka or a really beautiful tea on the other side. If you're used to drinking orange soda and purple drink, and then you go and you're trying to do a neat vodka tasting, it might be a little bit of a leap. But if you're used to spending a little bit of time and getting to know what you're drinking and tasting, then the differences and the quality is really apparent.
Yeah, this one is so flavorful, and yet I think it is the most faulty of the vodkas. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. I think maybe
and it's the most expensive of everything that we've tried. Mm-hmm. That one in Oregon is $36.
Ooh.
I mean, they made it from French grapes. You got to at least mark.
Yeah, I mean, it's imported. So there's also that. But
to be honest, $36 is not what I would have expected it to be even higher, in the low 40s maybe.
Give me a second. I'll be right back. I need to go grab something just to test something. One moment.
Okay. Brief interlude.
Is there any questions that we can throw up from the chat?
I think we kind of hit all of the questions, although there was a fun comment that I skipped over at the time because we were trying to move on into vodka. Some of those pears are sexy. So
Yes.
yeah, for those of you who don't know, there's an Instagram tradition where when they get the truckloads of pears in, they take pictures of the best pear butts.
Yep. 100%. While the C-suite and marketing team might not be fully behind the pear butt contest, here at Clear Creek, we give the people what they want. And apparently what they want is pear butts. So 1 or 2 of the best butts out of every truckload of pears throughout the whole pear season. We take a photo of them. I'm the keeper of the pear butts. And then once we've crushed the last pear of the season, we put them all on Instagram and let everybody vote which one was the best of the year. And I will say it's going to be tough to top last year's winner. When I put the photos up, I knew who was going to win. There was no doubt in my mind, and it was a landslide.
I'm so glad I got your face back on stream for that excellent cork pop.
By the way, yeah, I'm holding the bottle of Kirkland French vodka. I just want to taste it next to the Ciroc, because this is the vodka that I've used for pretty much everything at home and such.
So is much of America.
While we're talking about faults, Ian had pre-written a question that I thought was probably good for this point in time. The full question is, how does the distillation process differ for brandies as opposed to other spirits? I've heard conflicting things about the methanol content of tails and such.
Well, if you're going to talk about methanol, one of the interesting things about the methanol content, and we're talking about Europe, which is where all these brandies come from, there is a higher limit for methanol in the finished product than there is for everything else when it comes for fruit brandies. The most interesting, because it's a natural part of the fermentation of fruit brandies. There's just going to be more methanol in it. Lucky for us, the cure for methanol poisoning is ethanol. So it matters, but it doesn't really matter. If you were to drink a bunch of methanol and go into the ER and be like, I drank a bunch of methanol, they'd be like, cool, we're going to put you on a vodka drip. High five. The science behind it is that alcohol dehydrogenase, the enzyme that breaks down alcohol in your liver, preferentially breaks down ethanol over methanol. So it will be like, oh, this methanol is for losers. Ethanol is delicious. And then you just pee out all the methanol. Methanol causes all kinds of harm, but most importantly and firstly, blindness, because in order for dehydrogenase to break down methanol into its constituent parts, it takes a lot of oxygen to do that. And the most oxygen hungry part of your entire body is actually your optic nerve. And so your body's being starved of oxygen, and then you get lesions in your optic nerve because it's suffocating. And those lesions in your optic nerve do not heal. So that's where the blindness comes from in methanol poisoning. But again, the cure for methanol poisoning is ethanol. So the most interesting part when you're talking about methanol and brandies is also in the EU, in Europe. There's also a minimum requirement for the amount of methanol, because they wanted to make sure that if you're claiming to be making a fruit brandy, a fruit spirit, a schnapps, what have you, depending on where you're from, it's got all different kinds of names and all different kinds of cultural references. In order to be sure that you're actually making it the way you're supposed to and not just cheating and flavoring it, there is a minimum amount of methanol. Because if you are just making a very cheap as chips corn spirit and adding fruit flavoring to it and calling it pear brandy, it's not going to have the methanol content that an actually properly distilled, fermented and distilled fruit brandy would. So it is actually an important constituent for the brandy as well, and an identifier.
I have also heard from agave spirits enthusiasts that methanol is a desirable, like a higher level of methanol is actually a desirable trait because it carries more flavor.
If you're going into tequila, that's the dark place. Mufasa.
One spirit that you do not know.
Well, that is where a great deal of the amount of things that I know, or the depth of what I know, it's the shallow kiddie pool when it comes to tequila and mezcals. I enjoy them. I know some about them, but I hope someday to have the kind of free time where I can flesh out that part of my spirits education.
I'm sorry. I think I got distracted for a bit. What was the conclusion from the Kirkland vodka that you poured?
Right. So it's definitely not Ciroc. I can tell you that. It tastes almost exactly like the HRD corn vodka, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A great deal
Tastes
of
and smells
vodkas
very,
on
very
the shelf
similar.
are going to taste and smell very similar.
I thought you were about to say it's probably HRD, and I was like,
No,
no
it's
way.
not.
No.
No, it's not.
No, it does say that it is French. It does say that it is made from, I can't read that, but the finest grains. But yeah.
Okay, so it's a grain vodka.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that tells you something. Yeah.
So
Could be corn.
we kind of alluded to the cocktail side of vodkas, and I don't know if we're gonna have the time to actually do a bunch of experimenting with some of the things that I had us bring on just in case when it comes to having a couple quick cocktails. But we all know what the things that we have taste and smell like, and so now that we've tasted through these 6 vodkas, that when you're talking about crafting a really delicious vodka cocktail and why the flavor and execution and performance of a vodka and the kind of cocktail you're trying to make really matter. So if you can imagine of the 6 vodkas that we have in here, most of them are probably going to perform pretty well in a screwdriver, with the exception of the Ciroc. Ciroc might be a little weird in orange juice, right?
Yeah.
If I and if you were going to make something like lots of sugar, lots of caffeine, lots of flavor, your Kool-Aids of an espresso martini, all of these without the Ciroc, also totally fair game, right? They're going to do just fine. However, if you were going to try to make a really beautiful, nuanced espresso martini, I think out of this set here, I would be wanting to playing into the strengths of that concoction, and I would probably choose the potato vodka. I would choose the Chopin, and the reason I would is because it already has those dark, earthy, creamy notes that are going to play into the hand of somebody that's trying to create a really beautiful, nuanced, and complete espresso martini, right? And so that's the kind of choices that you're making when you're trying to choose your vodka, when you're thinking about the quality of the vodka, what it's made from, what it tastes like. It does really play an important role in a well-made craft cocktail construction. And to further make that point, during the trials with Timberline, the penultimate Timberline was so smooth that at like warmer, room temperature at 80 proof, you could actually properly drink it like water. It was so clean, it was so pure, it was so smooth. It was so deceptive that you really honestly couldn't tell that there was an 80 proof alcohol that you were drinking. You could literally drink it like water. Not being facetious at all. It was bonkers. But
worrying sentiment.
Right. 1, a worrying thing to put on the market. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But 2, while it was really delicious and a neat martini, right? Especially like ice cold straight out of the freezer, like my God. But when you put it in a majority of the cocktails that you would put a vodka in, the cocktail fell flat because you need some character, you need some bite, you need some zip. And what I call it is like cocktail Velcro, essentially, when you're building a vodka. And so when you put it in something, whether it was as simple as a screwdriver or as complex as the 12, 20 ingredient craft cocktails that we all know and love that are out there in some beautiful restaurants across the country, if there's no zip, there's nothing for those beautiful ingredients to hold on to, then the whole cocktail falls flat. And the difference between with the Timberline that we have now and the penultimate one, so subtle and yet so important. And so making sure that and getting interested in the category, knowing full well that the ingredients and the execution of the spirit matters just as much as the ingredients and the execution of any of your other favorite American single malts, bourbons, whiskeys, brandies.
So I didn't have time to get orange juice. Believe it or not, I don't usually have it around. But I do have ginger beer, and sadly, I didn't have time also to get limes. So like what I have is this. But what I was thinking was like maybe I put half an ounce of each of these vodkas in the Glencairns and like do a little mule.
Oh no,
simulation.
absolutely. That was kind of what I
sounds
figured
wonderful.
would be fun to see how, like, we picked soda and lime, orange juice, and I wanted to get some ginger beer. I couldn't find ginger beer today, so I let the team down on the ginger beer front. I could just get ginger ale. But yeah, having the opportunity to put 6 different vodkas in the same basic vodka cocktail and see how much those subtle changes really do matter when you're trying to really essentially write a poem with a flavor in a craft cocktail, and you're not just kind of making something that you're going to put a pitcher full and a bunch of fruit and a straw and go crazy.
As far as poems go, maybe a craft vodka is something like a haiku, like really spare, but everything matters.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. That's perfect. That's exactly what it is.
So in that sort of vein of very, very simple things, I do actually have a question. You mentioned these earlier. How do you like your vodka martinis, Caitlin?
With a pickle.
Ah, lovely.
That's where the Bartlemay pickleback. Your little gherkins, the little tiny guys. But really, any pickle will do. I think if you're even a random pickle enjoyer, you probably have 2 or 3 different kinds in your fridge. If you're a mega pickle enjoyer, you've got like pickled asparagus and pickled onions and pickled peppers and all different kinds and all different spices, all different flavors, dill or not. I don't care. They all work. They all work in some Timberline. I really, my mom actually wanted to use Timberline over Christmas last year, and that's kind of what it was born of. She pulled her bottle of Timberline out of the freezer and was like, "What am I gonna do with it? I'm ignoring it. I'm gonna finish my story and then read whatever you put up." And I just told her to grab, and she just grabbed a pickle spear, like out of the fridge. Cut a piece of it up, dunked it in the ice with the frozen Timberline, swirled it around. 10 out of 10. It's the easiest, quickest, most delicious cocktail you're ever going to make in 5 seconds. Okay, now show me what the comment was, because I actually honestly ignored it.
No, that's good. Ignoring it, because I'm bad at that. Does anyone here recognize this line? 2 shots of vodka.
How much vodka do you reckon she put into that kiwi cocktail?
It had to have been like 6 or 8 ounces. It was like a good portion of the bottle.
Yeah, I'm drinking orange juice straight out of the container.
That's fine.
I've done it before. It's your orange juice. Now, if you tell me you're sharing that with other people.
Nope, that's the joys of being single as hell. I drink orange juice completely and specifically out of the container. I can't tell you the last time I drank orange juice out of a glass.
Okay, this is going to be extremely niche, but like I like anything involving tasting, right? That's DemiTastes. That's why the name. There's a podcast called The Sporkful.
Okay.
The tagline is, it's not for foodies, it's for eaters. And there was an episode of it where he had Bill Nye on, and they got into a debate about how you would put like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich together and like how you use the tools, right? Like, do you stick the knife in the peanut butter and put it on the sandwich and then stick it in the jelly and put it on the sandwich, or do you get a separate knife? And I forget which one it was, but I think it must have been the host. He was like, no, like I lick off the knife and then
there's either going to be there's 3 options. There's 2 knives, there's a wiper, and there's a liquor. Like those are the 3 options.
And I've never,
and one of those options makes you a monster.
One of those options makes you a complete monster, because you're
pretty sure Bill Nye called him a monster.
And I don't think my life.
I'm pretty sure Bill Nye called him a monster, and I don't think I've ever seen Bill. I don't think I've ever heard, witnessed Bill so vehemently upset by something as that. Although he's got his whole like the Bill Nye saves the world thing, where he gets really upset about climate change, which is well worth getting upset about.
Which is absolutely worth getting upset about. But a close second, people that are liquors.
Yeah. And I'm with him. I'm in team you cannot lick. There's something like, even if I was the only person using that stuff, I wouldn't want to stick germs into the jelly. I don't use it fast enough.
But here's the thing. I'll drink out of this container, but I will also probably drain this by the time I get home. So
fair. I remember back when I used to drink a lot more like fruit juice and things like that, I would buy those big cartons of Newman's Own limeade, and I would drain them within about 1 or 2 days.
So I don't think we came back around to the rye, at least.
Oh, right.
So I have a big question about this. So I'm back around to the Belvedere. And before I taste this and try this once again, I wanted to ask, so Belvedere has I think they call it their Heritage Rye or something like that. I forget what their whole name is. But then they have 2 other things that I've always been interested in. Back when they released them some years ago, they marketed them as sort of a sign of what was it? Terroir, essentially. There's Svedka Lake and their forest, whose name I can't pronounce. Not Svedka, that's a different. I forget.
Yeah, Svedka's a different brand.
Yeah, Svedka's a different vodka. It was
That's right.
a lake and a forest.
Mhm.
And they were saying that these two vodkas tasted distinct, even though they use the same type of grain, I believe,
Mhm.
rye, just grown in different areas. How much does, and this is a somewhat of a fraught question from what I've understood, but how much does terroir affect the vodka and things like that, do you think?
I think the fairest answer, I just got an email. The fairest answer would be it matters as much as you want it to. I think, I mean, when you talk about, like to reference back to what I said about our beautiful Carl still here, we could change a few settings on the still and give you an entirely different timberline at a moment's notice, right? And it would have absolutely nothing to do with a change in fermentation. It would have absolutely nothing to do with a change in the raw materials, and it would have everything to do with changing the style with which we use this tool. So knowing that, I would say that the potential, like if you kept all of your settings the same and all of your grain grew in a different place, just like it's very important with wine, I would say that absolutely terroir could totally be expressed with the grains, because you can taste the difference between grapes that are grown in a sunny place at the top of the hill, at the bottom of the hill, the different kinds of soils that contribute to the minerals and the aromas that are going to be present. Whatever grows around those grapes are also play a big part of the flavors and aromas that you're going to find in any given glass of wine. And those are all things that are part of the terroir of any given expression. So the answer would be yes, absolutely. If the grain was grown in same grain, but grown in two different places, if handled correctly, absolutely. There could be an expression of terroir between those two places, pieces of, or those two expressions of grain. But I will say that depending on the still that you choose to use, maybe they're distilled in two different stills. Maybe it's the same still, but different settings. Maybe it's different water. The water's been treated a little bit differently for the cutting water. There are all different things that you can do to accentuate the differences and make it more apparent, make it a little louder and more obvious to your average consumer. So without having done any research on those two expressions, the answer is yes. And then yes again for different reasons.
I might pick them up someday then. I've always been interested in them, never really gotten around to trying them myself.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike this Belvedere rye, which I'm coming back around to and quite enjoying. This is very different than the other ones thus far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I wanted to make a point to make sure that you guys circled back around to the Belvedere, because now that you had the opportunity to really dig into, wow, there is a lot of differences in your average, mid-shelf vodka, then the Belvedere actually gets kind of a fair shake on the other side of it.
So I started off with raw dough, and what I'm getting now is something like pizza crust.
Okay, I get you now.
And also there's something about like out here, something volatile that I don't really know what it is, but it feels solventy.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's almost a given because we're talking about alcohol. So but it's not ethanol that I'm smelling. It's something sweeter. I just don't have a flavor note. Also, there's a pepperiness to this. I think that's part of what's feeding into why I think it tastes like pizza dough.
That might be it.
But when you talk about all the differences in all of these, and then you can start to, when you think about all the cocktails that you could possibly make, then you like if, wow, Beam's here really late. My goodness. Sorry, there's a construction company next door, and like, granted, I've been here at 7:00 a lot lately, but they usually are done making noises by 5. And I'm like, why am I hearing like a loud diesel engine and steel tracks outside the back door all of a sudden? It's a little late for Beam to be moving equipment around. Anyways, and so you start talking about the difference of these, and you can start thinking about how you might play to use them to highlight other ingredients, or use them to play into your the things that you might use in a craft cocktail. Like I said before, when you're talking about an espresso martini, maybe you use the potato vodka because of its earthy tones and the creamy texture, but maybe you want to use the Belvedere instead because it has those kind of like high shiny notes and a little bit of that perceived acidity, because you're going to use some of the other ingredients to kind of flesh out the total character of that cocktail. Versus if you're going to use something like if you could use the Belvedere with the spiciness that it has, and then play into that spiciness and actually use like a habanero syrup and some mint and really highlight those things. So those are the kind of places that you can go. You can use it as a contributor, or you can use it as a contrast in the total assembly of your cocktail.
The pawn asks for a clarification on pepper. I mean, kind of like a fresh cracked black pepper, or maybe not a fresh cracked, but like ground black pepper is kind of what I'm getting. And it resembled, I almost want to say my brain went first to, oh, that kind of smells like an agave spirit. And then I was like, why? And it was like, oh, it's black pepper.
Mm-hmm. I always get with the black pepper. In fact, actually, when we were doing some messing around with some flavored items for a different brand, and we're trying to like reconstruct a flavor, I used a homemade like black pepper extract, a cracked black pepper extract, to mimic tannins, and it actually does a pretty fair shot at it. So sometimes you get like that cracked black pepper, you get a little bit of that phenolic characteristic, those tannin kind of drying characteristics, and then once you get that, then it's like, then you find it everywhere. But
See, that's
it
what
works.
they should have done instead of poisoning all those wines in Austria.
Wow. Deep cut.
Yeah, the pawn says, I've never heard of pepper and vodka, but not much experience with vodka. To be honest, same here.
Mm-hmm.
This represents 75% of my sum total experience with different vodka brands right here. Right? Before this, it's been Smirnoff and Monopolova, I think, exclusively. Maybe Tito's once, but in a cocktail, so I wouldn't have had an opportunity to taste it neat. So like, yeah, I've got 6 brands here that I've tried Timberline before, but the rest of these are brand new to me. And like, yeah, Timberline was the one that was in complete isolation.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell this is different from other vodkas.
Yeah.
Other vodkas that I've had on occasion, I'm sort of like, maybe it's different. I don't know. But having all of these next to each other, it is abundantly clear that not one of these is truly alike. And I probably, I would go, I don't have a real way to blind myself right now and like mix them up and taste them. But I would go so far as to say there's a good chance that I could correctly identify any one of these from the 6.
I enjoyed Timberline so much that I actually looked up during this podcast to see whether or not I could get it right around here. Unfortunately, I cannot, so we'll figure that out at some point. But I have very much enjoyed Timberline. I very much enjoyed, because this is more or less the sum total of my experience with actually tasting vodkas. I've never tried this before, but yeah.
What you were saying about really smooth vodka, Caitlin, my first experience with vodka Monopolova was pretty much, this is so smooth that it like, now that you've said like, oh yeah, maybe cocktails don't have much to hang on to if you have a really smooth vodka. Like maybe Monopolova is not the vodka I should be using, because my go-to vodka cocktail at that time was, back when I drank any vodka cocktails, which I don't really anymore, it was Black Russian, sometimes a White Russian. And so I made a Black Russian to my usual spec.
The dude abides.
The dude abides. There's probably a better response
2 seconds.
to that.
My laptop's just about to die.
Okay, I'm just gonna keep talking to the audience.
Yeah, totally.
So I had this spec that I was using for Black Russian, which is just a simple 2-ingredient cocktail. I don't think you'd call it a highball because neither one of them is soda. But
is
on
it
the
a low
rocks,
ball maybe? I don't know.
I guess you put it in a rocks glass, which is sometimes called a low ball.
Johnny
glass,
5 Alive.
Johnny 5 Alive.
That was a close one.
Okay.
I had to plug my laptop in. We're about to die.
About to die.
Yeah.
So I was using Smirnoff and Kahlua to make White Russians, and I was used to the bite that I was getting from the Smirnoff. And then I had made this switch over to Monopolova, and I was like, well, okay, I'm gonna make I was writing like a term paper or something, and I was like, well, like this is gonna be a slog. I should have a cocktail. So I made myself a Black Russian with my usual like 1 shot of vodka and, I don't know, half a shot or less, maybe a third of a shot of Kahlua on the rocks. And I took a sip of that and I was like, something happened. I didn't put enough vodka in this, right? So I put more. I think it might have been a whole shot more.
Oh dear.
That's the dangerous side of a quality vodka.
and
or
then I was
or a mismatch on your vodka selection for
it
your
could be,
cocktail.
yeah. And then I was there. I was a few sips in, maybe half of the way done with the cocktail and working on my turn paper, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm drunk. What? What happened? And I looked at this and I was like, oh, new vodka.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, you know what? Term paper can wait until tomorrow.
We're drinking more vodka.
It was more like I don't trust my brain to make good decisions anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was my experience with really smooth vodka. And like you adapt to that, you learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at that point, I think that probably is why I cemented in my brain, like, vodka doesn't add flavor to a cocktail.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of just make whatever that you would have made without vodka and just add vodka to it. And it's like, I am convinced at this point I'm probably wrong about that. I think, for example, there's something to be said for a vodka martini, especially an extra dry vodka martini, where you can let the vodka shine. And so I'm looking forward to trying this Timberline. If I don't end up using, I mean, I've only used less than half an ounce of it so far, but like if I do the little cocktail experiment here, I could probably do a cocktail experiment with all of these for a few different cocktails.
I think
so I could do a martini.
And when you talk about like the smoothness and the subtle flavor of a vodka martini, a straight vodka martini, it's amazing what you can do with some just like simple changes. I'm gonna forget his last name because I'm a monster. His name is the Conscientious Bartender on Instagram. His name is Robbie. He's currently he just actually was hired on to run the bar program at the Heathman in Portland. And he's done some experiments just adding subtle amounts of different acids. So the difference between a citric acid or a malic acid or a tartaric acid, all of those when added into at various amounts and different amounts in the different kinds of vodkas will change the balance of those flavors. And it takes just a tiny bit to edge it into a whole different realm of flavors and aromas. So you can do a lot of really neat, really quiet, subtle changes to make these vodkas kind of pop in all different directions.
Sorry, could you guys hear my keyboard? I just realized I didn't mute my mic.
No, can't hear your keyboard.
That's good. That's good. Noise cancellation. Good thing.
We, however, will not be talking about how much of the Timberline vodka that I've had tonight. But I will be looking to get more soon.
Celebrity endorsement? Yeah, I've been looking for Timberline vodka for a year and a half since the first time I tasted it, and I just haven't managed to find it in a store. Which, to be fair, for the last year and a half, I haven't walked very much into liquor stores because online retailers and going in person to distilleries ends up being a lot more effective for what I'm looking for. So like that's part of it. My local Total Wine doesn't carry it. I think a lot of other stores do, and I just haven't gone into them. So, yeah, I actually, are we still having fun? Because I kind of feel like I want to put together this mule for
Absolutely.
all of these vodkas now and see how
I don't know if anybody else is watching, but even if it's just the three of us, I'm on board.
Let's do it. All right, what would you spec for a mule when I'm making like a half ounce of vodka worth of a mule?
I mean, are you gonna try like just two different ones?
I might do all six.
Oh, then do all six.
I'm thinking a half ounce of vodka is, well, it's gonna be a lot of alcohol by the end of the night, but I probably won't finish.
I mean, you don't have a whole lot of each one, so it just takes a splash.
Yeah, I was thinking. So that's the thing. Like, what's the smallest ingredient? Because I want to base it around that.
I don't know.
All right, I'm gonna have to look up a cocktail spec for a mule.
Yeah, you're gonna have to look up. You're asking the wrong gal for cocktail specs off the cuff, my man.
Well, you're a vodka maker. What do you?
Yeah, I know. I drink it with a pickle. You asked me. You didn't. Well, okay, you didn't ask me what else I do with it, and the answer is I drink it with a pickle.
I was out making a cocktail. What spec do you need?
Just make a mule. So
make a mule.
In the meantime, tell us more about the pickleback challenge while I'm looking up a cocktail recipe.
Oh, that was a complete surprise. I had no idea about it. Apparently, the sales and marketing team and Joseph and Garrett had all colluded because I had brought up the pickle being a thing in a meeting, and then I don't think that everyone necessarily believed me that it was delicious. And then like within 4 hours, Forbes dropped an article that was like, hey, are you putting pickles in your vodka? Because you should. And I was like, vindication. So that was, and then all of a sudden the Bartlemay and pickles and Timberline became a thing, and then our Washington sales rep Bree I always stumble over her last name, Bria Wilski. She is wonderful, and she had the idea to focus the Timberline like sales promotion and event promotion around Seattle Cocktail Week around the Bartlemay Pickleback. So it's just a little cornichon in a shot of vodka, and then when we poured them at the tasting, we actually just if you wanted to make a whole bottle of it, you pour like, I don't know, 3 ounces of the vodka off the bottle, and then you fill it back up with your favorite pickle juice, shake it up, and go nuts. It's delicious.
All right, I think I figured out a spec for the mule.
Mm-hmm.
So the recipe that I looked up is 1.5 ounces of vodka, half an ounce of half an ounce of lime juice, and a half cup of ginger beer. A half cup is going to be 8 ounces. So 2 ounces versus
half a cup is 4 ounces.
Sorry, and a cup is 8 ounces. Half a cup is 4 ounces. So 4 ounces against the 2 ounces of the others. So basically, half an ounce of vodka, a splash of lime juice, and fill it up to the ounce and a half line in the Glencairn, and that's a mule.
Nailed it.
I'm thinking that's gonna work.
I believe in you.
So first, let's test the one. So Belvedere vodka, mule, garnish free. And I'm surprised that there's no simple syrup in this, to be honest. I thought that was part of the...
There's usually enough syrup in the ginger beer.
That's what it is.
Yeah, I think sometimes people forget the whole point of a garnish is to add a little bit of something to the smell. It's not to make it look pretty. It's because you want to highlight something in the aroma. And so that little sharp spike of something in the mint or the citrus or whatever, like it actually does serve a purpose. It's kind of become a trope at this point in time, and very much so a decoration. But it does, from a culinary perspective, was meant to have a very specific purpose in the crafting of a cocktail.
I'm going to say right off the bat, putting ice in it makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm no bartender, so like that's probably obvious to people who make cocktails, but it's not necessarily obvious to me.
I mean, to be honest, just having the opportunity, had we planned a little bit better, and then trying these straight out of a freezer as well, so room temperature and out of a freezer, and then you get an entirely different viscosity.
True. That would be fun. I'm going to stick all these in a freezer and then compare them later. Well, probably I shouldn't jump the gun on that because, hey, dry week starts tomorrow.
Yep. But yeah, speaking of, I guess we haven't at all hinted at the fact that like, ooh, spooky October and your favorite vodka and your favorite spooky October cocktail. Because certainly even your average drinker might be convinced to do some fun batch cocktails for the Halloween festivities. So
yeah, that's a good point.
Take that extra little bit of care when you're thinking about which vodka that you're going to put in your spooky cocktails.
Indeed. Okay, the potato vodka mule, not good. That sort of earthy butyric thing with the lime and ginger does not work.
That's great to know, actually.
So I'm glad that I'm having, like, I was hoping to elicit a visceral reaction here. This is the one. Not good.
Which is, again, why I spend so much time refuting the whole vodka doesn't matter thing. Like, the vodka choice in a cocktail matters.
Okay, to be fair, the taste is okay. The aftertaste is like toilet water. It's awful. Okay.
Used or unused toilet water?
Here we go. Ian asking the real questions of the night.
I can't so much as say that I have actually tasted either, but imagine...
You have a rich.
That's just a lack of commitment, Doug.
Imagine a bathroom that hasn't been cleaned super well, and that sort of gentle odor.
Ouch!
Gentle. Wow. Don't know if I call it that, but
wow.
Well, so there's dirty bathroom, but then there's like clean bathroom that's not like really clean. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Okay. I am, for my part, having a my preferred what is that? A martini spec, which is 2-to-1 vodka to vermouth with a lemon twist, which is a for a modern drinker, a kind of weird one, I gather. Maybe we'll get into the history of that someday. But it is done with a Ciroc vodka because I figured it would do well with a lemon twist.
Mhm.
Honestly, overpowers pretty much everything else in the drink, but it's quite nice.
Mhm.
I'm being very unscientific with measurements here, so I'm just hoping that I'm putting the right amount of a splash of lime in these.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
And by the end of
Oh,
the
you're
night,
using
I will.
Bundaberg. That's a good choice.
By the end of the yeah, it's a really good one. By the end of the night, I'm definitely going to have had 2 shots of vodka and then some.
Yeah, see, you'll notice that I have not partaken in the mad science part of the show. I live in I should probably shouldn't tell you where I live. I live in a not Hood River place, and I am still in a Hood River place. So, and while I did have a sandwich at 4, I think it's best that I stick to my carton of orange juice so that I can get home at some point tonight.
Indeed.
I know that I've had enough to drink already because all of a sudden a sandwich sounds really good. You remember? Yeah, you remember when we were doing our bar crawl that night, and I was like, "We're going to the next bar," and I'm like, "Hey, should we stop somewhere for food?"
I always forget that you don't have to have food in bars in Washington. It blows my mind. I'm a native Oregonian. Like, you have to have at least like chips or tater tots or something on the menu. If you're going to drink alcohol, you do not in Washington. If you go downtown Belltown, there's like 3 places that you can get food, but there's like 90 places that you can drink. It is bazonkers.
Back in Virginia, I think an establishment had to derive at least 50% of its profits from food sales. So there was this big upcropping of like speakeasy bars, because what they would do was, my favorite one was called like Captain Nelson's or something like that. It was behind a hidden wall in a donut shop because they could just consider part of their profits from the donut shop.
Genius.
Yeah. How was that last one, Doug?
Haku vodka, one of my besides Timberline, one of my favorite vodkas in the lineup. Smelled good. Taste was fine. Aftertaste was weird. I don't know what to say. Like, I'm not really used to thinking about aftertaste so much, but it feels like a theme right now.
Oh man, I am such a if the finish isn't right, I'm gonna complain. Like, when you talk about blending McCarthy's and everything like that, like if I try a whiskey and you taste it and you're like, oh, this is great, and then it just falls off a cliff, oh, I'm gonna be mad. Ooh, I'm gonna be mad.
Yeah. To clarify, I love a really good finish on a whiskey.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
When I'm talking about neat spirits and like good finishes, like long, the right balance, like all this sort of like I'm gonna go. I spend way more time thinking about the nose and the finish than I do about the taste usually of a neat spirit. But
if something goes sideways at the end, like, I doesn't matter what it is. If a cocktail goes sideways at the end, I'm not happy.
And I don't think I've ever had that experience, which I think speaks to the quality of the bartenders that I've had, just on average, because like here I'm tasting, the vodka's aftertastes were not objectionable for the most part. But the aftertaste of this mule spec that I'm using right now with these vodkas is wild and varied, and I don't like a lot of them so far.
Let's be entirely fair, though. You are using like pre-bottled lime juice, which might have something to do with it. Yeah.
So like, we have the breadth of, yes, that's absolutely the case. I had limes and they went bad, so I tried, but it didn't work out. So I do have like the breadth of the different vodkas. So at least I can say, like, if I've picked a bad spec, maybe the spec is just bad. That's fine. That's fair. But the Belvedere vodka made a good mule. Like, I enjoyed that, and I'm tasting it again right now. Like, colder helps. It was a little weird at room temperature, and like I should actually put ice in all of these and see if they improve. But like, it wasn't bad without it. It was just weird to be having a mule. Sorry, I'm far off my mic. It was weird to be having a mule that wasn't chilled, so I felt like it needed that. But like, the other ones were like obviously objectionable, like right out the gate. So like, okay, maybe ice will help. So that's worth trying. All right, I'm moving on to the Timberline Mule.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's the one. This one, give the people what they want. That's the one we're really waiting for.
Well, once I do it, then everyone who's still paying attention is going to tune out. So
well,
they might
be I see. They might be waiting for a really bad one. Who knows?
The Chopin potato vodka in a mule was bad.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I mean,
but
speaking of tuning out, like this interview with Caitlin has been very, very good for me. God, don't go back and watch the interview with Joe, because like I think by the end of that interview I was gone.
oh no.
It was my first time trying McCarthy's,
Mhm.
like period, and I liked it so much that I think I drank about a fourth of the bottle.
Oh no.
It was a bad time. I was not okay. I think I managed to hold it together, but I haven't checked the VOD to be sure.
Well,
Mhm.
nothing stood out as particularly bad, so
Thank God.
there's that at least. I
I
watched
could
back
not
almost
move
every one of our
after we
streams at least
closed the
once.
call.
Yeah. Buttery works.
Buttery were okay.
Yeah, so Timberline and a mule, the butteriness comes through and
Mhm.
it doesn't have any weird off notes or weird corners. Aftertaste is fine. The palate is quite buttery.
Mhm.
I would say it resembles, like, not with the protein flavor, but like it resembles there was this really lazy baked fish that I used to make, which is like take some tilapia and wrap it in foil and put lemon juice and zucchini in there and just bake it for
Mhm.
a while.
Oh yeah, totally. Like
That is what
papillon.
that is what the taste of this reminds me of, plus ginger.
I'm okay with that.
What
When
an interesting thing.
when we tested Timberline, one of the things that was really important to us was making sure that it did work in cocktails. And so, like I said, the penultimate Timberline didn't work. And so we did, go back to the drawing board, and we wanted to make something that we wanted to over deliver on the price point, which I feel like we kind of proved in this tasting, considering that 3 of the other vodkas here were, 10 plus more dollars a bottle more, and it was hanging in there with the champs. I'll leave it to you to say whether it was better or worse than, but it's right in there. I'm willing to say that it's in that family. But
I would
we
say
also
definitely over delivered. No debate about that.
we also wanted it to be a bit of a Swiss Army knife, as far as something that you'd have in the back bar, something that you could totally pour in a neat vodka martini that would play well with any of the kind of accoutrement that you might put in it, whether it's a pickled onion or a pickle or an olive, but also work really well in your like bargain basement, dare I say, college kid cocktails, right? Your flat monster cocktails. We wanted it to play in those just as well as we wanted it to play in a 12 ingredient gourmet cocktail. And I think for the most part, we've found something that works in all of those realms.
I would have to try a lot more cocktails to confirm. So
Oh,
I
the
can't comment on
horror.
whether it succeeded at all of
Oh,
that.
the horror.
But yeah, well, I've gone the better part of 5 or 6 years drinking basically no vodka.
Mhm.
Like I had a vodka Monopolova bottle from like 2017 that I just used up like 4 months ago. Right, like that's the rate at which I use vodka, and most of the vodka was used hosting guests, so like it's not even something that I'm going to make for
On
myself.
most of the vodka I consume is a tiny little bit in a Monday through Friday at about 8:30 in the morning
Yeah.
at still strength.
The
Somewhere between
wor-
8:30 and 9 o'clock, a few sips of 192 proof Timberline on any given Monday through Friday. That's the most.
workers' shop.
That's the average. I'm very honest when I say that I mostly drink at work. I mostly drink at work.
It's a
And
tough
to be honest, I do most of my drinking on this podcast now, to be honest. Like I was telling somebody, like, yeah, I drink like an average of, I mean, I still drink like an average of 7 drinks a week. Like I am
Mhm.
still in that medically insignificant category. I try
Mhm.
very hard at that.
Yeah.
Recently, 3 or 4 of those drinks are happening on the podcast.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, if it makes you feel better, it was like maybe 3 weeks ago, and I had my first drink of the day at 6:30 in the morning. So we were
This is the life of the distiller, right?
we were doing some. We were making sure that the newest batch of Trails in 10 that it was just about to be harvested from the Oregon oak barrels had met spec, and so the blenders were like, "Hey, can you come down to the plant early in the morning before you start the stills at Clear Creek?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course I can."
I believe that you guys have a thing about referencing online retailers, so do your spiel if you must. But the pawn mentions you can get Timberline with Drizzly from Vista Wine and Spirits if you're
Interesting.
looking.
We are hopefully, I don't know if it's podcastable, which place we're going live with. I think maybe somebody said something about it on Instagram, but we are in cahoots with an online retailer at the moment, so that some of the places where we don't have a distributor coverage will have access to the HRD and Clear Creek portfolio, which will include things like Trails End and Timberline.
Okay, HRD vodka in a mule, no surprise, tastes like a mule.
Yep.
So like this is definitely, so like apparently the spec that I have for the mule is fine. Like it's not, it could be fresher, it could be better, but it's fine, right? And
Yeah.
we're doing cocktail science right now. We're not doing real cocktails. You definitely get the solventy nature of the vodka out of that though. So like,
yeah, but most of your bog standard mules are going to be with well vodka. Most of your well vodkas are going to be a grain neutral spirit based vodka, because that's where you're going to pinch your pennies.
This reminds me of a very specific time that I went to a bar in Seattle where there was a live band playing, and like I didn't have cash to tip the band, so I bought the bass player a beer after the solo, and I realized after the fact he probably thought I was hitting on him.
Hey, you know what? It's still a great feeling. It's still a great feeling.
I mean, I think that probably the ideal form of the Moscow Mule is a little bit, what's the word for it?
Sharp.
A little bit not great. A little bit solventy.
Yeah. A little bit not great.
I mean, it sounds and feels more crafty than a screwdriver does, so I understand why it's kind of had a, I don't know, maybe it's kind of waning now. I don't know, 6-7 years ago now, mules were like all the rage, and every bar had like copper cups, and every bar had some sort of bespoke mule. And so now, hilariously, the espresso martini over the last 2 years has come back, but you don't see mules on as loudly broadcasted on menus anymore.
Okay, Ciroc vodka mule.
Okay,
as you might imagine, strange.
Okay, I was hoping it was going to be good, actually.
I wouldn't say it's not good, but it is strange.
I didn't think it was going to be bad, but I was fairly certain that it was going to be strange.
Because it basically tastes like a mule that you put some Sprite in also.
Sure.
And it does have an aftertaste of like aspartame. Mm-hmm. So like that's a consistent theme.
Mm-hmm. Diet Sprite.
Mm-hmm. Diet Sprite. Yeah, like I would drink that. That's fine. I would be happier probably having ordered a mule and gotten the HRD one.
Mm-hmm.
Because like that's more what I'd be expecting. But like I wouldn't be upset about the syrup.
Yeah, but if you paid $8 to $12 for any of these and they were garnished well and they came with pebble ice and a nice copper glass and a great freshly slapped mint.
And you're talking to your buddies, so you're not really paying attention to the cocktail anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so I think I've given my raw reactions to all of these. But just to recap, the Belvedere vodka made from rye is a pretty good mule. Like fine. Like I would say this is a good upgrade mule. That like it's going to give you what you're expecting, but it's not going to be too different. The Chopin potato vodka mule, I don't want to taste it again. That's how bad it is. But I will. Even on the rocks, you can smell the earth.
But will because science.
Yeah, because I put rocks in it, so now I need to know. You can still smell the potato peel and the butyric.
Mm-hmm.
It took the edge off.
I love biting into a raw potato. It's my favorite pastime.
That's some bullshit.
That's exactly what this tastes like.
That's some bullshit potato. That Joseph would do. Joseph, every once in a while, he would just get this wild hair and he'd be like, you know what? I'm going to do something absolutely ridiculous and just completely break Bartlemay. And that would, by taking a whole bite of a potato, would be along the rich history of things that he's done. That one time, his wife, Janet, was really excited about she really wanted to have some sprouts. And so they started some sprouts and they were eating sprouts and salads and sandwiches. And then Janet was like, all right, it scratched the itch on the sprout front. But then they still had all of these sprouts and Joseph didn't want them to go to waste. So he was bringing these like half pint jars jammed full of sprouts and eating them with his lunch every day.
Like bean sprouts?
No, like the little thin sprouts.
Oh, okay, sure.
Like the
Got it,
little
got it,
like
got it.
Harry Sprouts
Like
sprout. I can't
alfalfa
remember.
sprouts,
Maybe is that
something
what
like
they
that.
are? I don't know. You put them on
I know what
sandwiches.
you're talking about.
Yeah. Anyways, but he was bringing them in like those little half-pint jars, mason
Huh.
jars. And like I was taking something outside into the garbage, and like he's in his office, I'm out in production. I like go outside, put something in the garbage, and he just like whips out of the offices outside, doesn't say anything, but he's got his like headphones on, and he's got the jar of sprouts, and he just stares at me, like standing right in front of me, stares at me, and he's got a beard, and he opens the jar, and he like 4 fingers grabs a whole handful of sprouts and just jams it in there, just willy-nilly, sprouts everywhere, all over his shirt front, and he dead eyes me. He doesn't break eye contact, and then he goes in for a second handful, just mouthful of sprouts everywhere, all his beard, the entire time, just chewing, never breaks eye contact, and I am dying laughing, and he never laughs. He doesn't make a sound. He finishes the jar, and then does like a and then just goes back in his office. And I am like just a puddle outside just for no reason. One time he used to do it. He would do it with grapefruit because he's a madman. So he would buy a grapefruit and he would just come out to the distillery, dead eye me, take a bite out of the grapefruit rind and chew it completely. The rind. Never break, no emotion, maintain eye contact, and then just turn around and walk away.
This is some delicious chaotic energy
No,
right there.
like I miss him so much. I'm so happy for him. I'm so proud of him. He's doing wonderfully. He's, of course he is. But I miss that dude. He was an amazing person to have the opportunity to work so closely with for the years that we did.
This is Joe?
Yeah.
Have you,
Just to make sure.
I'm gonna ask a question that Doug did not allow me to ask earlier. Have you considered burning Joe in effigy to establish your dominance yet, or?
No. No, it's kind of funny. So Joseph's time with Clear Creek was in 2 sections, and we kind of joke that maybe it'll be in 3 sections someday. So he was at Clear Creek from 2005 to 2009. I was hired in 2010 as essentially his replacement as a person who fixes, as a fixer person, because I'm fairly handy. And so I grew up with the brand, hearing all of these wonderful Joseph stories from his first tenure at Clear Creek. And he would stop by on occasion. And he says that he always really remembered me for various attributes on the handful of times that he stopped by before we were coworkers. And I don't disbelieve that, but it's very sweet. But I felt like I already knew him really well because of all the Joseph stories that I grew up with. And so now, after having worked with him for 6 years, I have some of my own personal stories of having the opportunity of getting to work with him so closely for 6 years. And so just like we spend a lot of time talking about Steve's legacy and what it means not only to craft spirits, craft distilling across the country, and also what it means to us personally here as members of the brand, as members of Clear Creek Distillery. Joseph and all of his wonderful stories, his joy and his excitement and his passion for the brand and for what we do is going to be a part of the ever widening quilt of stories that we share with interns, that we share with new hires, that we pass on to our friends, people that become friends and family of the distillery. So while he might be in Carson City, Nevada right now, his stories and his participation in this brand are forever a part of how we explain the importance of Clear Creek to not only new distillers, but to everybody that takes a sip of McCarthy's or of pear brandy.
Do you know? Do you know if Kat or Garrett have a favorite story yet?
Well, Kat unfortunately never had the opportunity to work with Joseph. Their first day was the 1st of August. So they started after Joseph had left. So I'm not sure. I've told them several Joseph stories, but I'm not sure if they have the opportunity to have a favorite yet. I've yet to plumb the depths of the entertaining Joseph stories. I will have to ask Garrett in the morning what his favorite Joseph story is.
To wrap up my review of these mules, On ice, the Haku vodka aftertaste improved. So like it has a good nose, it has a pretty good taste. My objection to it was the aftertaste before. On ice, that's significantly tamped down. I'd say this is a fine mule, but I'd say you're playing with fire if you wanted to put the Haku vodka in a mule. Haku vodka was good by itself. I think it's probably going to be good in something like a martini or maybe some other kind of cocktail, but it does not work with the citrus, I think is the problem. The Timberline vodka, I think this is a good like craft cocktail upgrade where you would actually garnish the mule differently or you would add some extra ingredient to the mule, I think. And what occurred to me first is I think this would pair really well with a sprig of lemongrass.
Mm-hmm.
The HRD vodka, of course, is just your bog standard mule,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. And the Ciroc vodka continues to be strange even when it's cold.
Fair, totally fair. I think that's a fair assessment.
All right, cool. I think we probably exhausted this topic. Thank you for staying with us for a full 2.5 hours, which is by far not the longest stream that we've done, but it is definitely a longer one, and it has been a lot of fun. And thank you for indulging this silly wild hair that we caught where we wanted to do a vodka episode on a whiskey podcast with a Brandy Distiller. It was just too hilarious not to do. As always, you are a delight to talk to, and I hope that we do get to have you on soon again for a Brandy episode.
I will hold you to that. I say I greatly look forward to it, but I'm going to hold you to it.
You're in the Discord where we plan these things, so there's no way that you're going to let us forget.
Absolutely, I won't let you forget. But yeah, no, that we have yet to really plumb the depths of the information that I can share about the history of brandy and the history of Clear Creek and everything that we make. So looking forward to the opportunity to have another chat with you, and hopefully Phill gets to be there at the next one as well. So thank you so much for having me on. I genuinely have been super looking forward to this. And I have had an absolute blast. So thank you so much for all of your wonderful questions and for a great idea to have a vodka tasting on a whiskey podcast. It's been a great amount of fun.
And now I've made good on my promise to try to sell more Timberline, and not because I'm in any way sponsored. Because our usual disclaimer, we're not sponsored in any way. We talk about the brands we like because we love them. We'll take a sponsorship. I'm okay. I'm open to affiliate links or anything like that. If Clear Creek has a way and wants to do something like that, that'd be cool. Can't think of another brand I'd want to partner with more than Clear Creek for that. Okay, before we sign off, I just want to say this new platform recommends that everybody stay on the call for a little bit so that your individual audio feeds can get uploaded. So this is the first time we're doing that. I don't know how long that's going to take, but let's see if we can stay on for a few minutes afterwards. So besides that, thank you for everyone who actually kind of made it close to the end of this podcast. It's looking like most people have signed off already, and that's okay. I totally get it. Thank you for tuning into the DemiTastes podcast. This is the first time that we're using that branding, so I'm still trying to get it through my head. Hopefully, this will end up in an audio-only form on every podcast platform that you can find. And until then, I hope you'll continue to catch us on Twitch, and our VODs are always available on YouTube. I want to give a shout out to the Whiskey Lodge. I'm still using their branding partly because I don't have a DemiTastes branding of my own yet, and also because the Whiskey Lodge is where we all met, and it is a great time to be in there. I'll drop the link in chat again for anybody who's still here. That's an invite link to join the Whiskey Lodge Discord. We have conversations like this all the time, and they unfold over the course of hours or days, and it's a lot of fun. We've got distillers in there. That's how we met Joe and Caitlin, and a few other people who are either secretly or openly distilleries in the Discord, and it's a lot of fun, so I hope you join. And having said way too much in my outro, I want to say I'm going to grab my Timberline Vodka Mule, and cheers to sign off.
Cheers.
It's been a lot of fun. Sláinte. Uh-oh.
You're fired again.
There we go.
Whoopsies.
Cheers.